Just a reminder, if you do have a computer, please don't join via video, as wonderful as that is. It's a bandwidth pressure, so. Yes.
So we are waiting on one trustee to show up. We're going to give him a few more minutes and hopefully we'll have a full house soon. But we are standing by for just a bit. Standing by for just a bit, please.
Yeah. It might be on my end.
All right, time is up. We're going to begin. I call to order this meeting of the Nederland Board of Trustees at 4 minutes past 7. We'll begin with a roll call. Macy?
Mayor Taylor,
Here.
Trustee Blakemore,
Here.
Trustee Corvalin, Trustee Coombs Ismail,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Mahold,
Here.
and we're waiting on Trustee Baumhofer.
All right then, let's turn to the consent agenda. Does anyone have any comments regarding the consent agenda or a motion?
Only to thank Alan Apt for volunteering to be on SAB. We can definitely use his leadership there.
Very good. Any other comments or a motion?
I motion to approve the consent agenda. This is Karen Blakemore.
Seconds.
We have a motion and a second on the table. Macy, please call the vote.
Mayor Pro Tem Mahold,
Aye.
Trustee Coombs Ismail,
Yes.
Mayor Taylor,
Yes.
Trustee Corvalin,
Yes.
and Trustee Blakemore.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, let's begin with public comment on non-agenda items. We'll begin with the people in the room and then we'll turn to the virtual attendants. Would anyone care to comment on non-agenda items? You'll have 3 minutes to speak. And if we have questions, we may speak for an additional 3 minutes asking questions. Seeing no one in the room interested in speaking, we'll turn now to the virtual attendees. Would anyone virtually like to speak? Raise your hand, hit *6 on your cell phone. Miranda will let me know if you're raising your hand because I'm a Luddite and I don't have a computer here.
So Riley McAllister was interested in giving a comment.
Very fine. Riley, please proceed.
All right, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
All right, I would just like to offer my support in the instance that there are 2 more board seats. I would like to volunteer for the position and would love to help serve the community.
Very fine. Thank you, Riley.
There are hands raised, but I know Kathleen Chipai has a comment and she may be on the phone and she'll need to press *6 to unmute.
Very fine. Ms. Chipai.
Kathleen Chipai, 30-year resident, 18-year business owner. I first want to protest Alan Apt or anyone else being appointed to SAB or any of the advisory boards when the town website says applications are still being accepted, in this case through May 25th. Policy and procedure have a purpose, and the town needs to start playing fair and just. Which brings me to having to address the ongoing election fraud by Julian Taylor and Miranda Fisher, and why the appointment of the 4th place election candidate, David Seitz, isn't on tonight's agenda. Public record shows Taylor and Fisher knew months before the election that Taylor would be unable to continue on the BOT and that 2 seats would be open in addition to the 3 trustee seats that were term ending and opening. 5 candidates ran for what we know were 5 open BOT seats. Mulholland didn't run for mayor because Taylor did. Fisher enabled Taylor to cock-block 2 board seats, and per his email to Fisher, apparently because, quote, the remaining board members may represent too limited a scope to select a diverse and qualified appointments. So the guy moving East Coast for employment, who denied voters a fair and free election on April 5th, and then lied about it an hour after taking his oath as mayor, seems to think he gets to decide who is on the BOT instead of the Nederland voters. And Fisher blatantly misled voters through March that Taylor might not take the oath as mayor in explanation as to why the 4th trustee seat was not open on the ballot. When corrid emails between the 2 show Taylor had always planned to take the oath as mayor since February, and Fisher knew it. The last time a trustee ran for the mayor's seat with 2 years left in their term, the ballots allowed voters to pick up to 4 candidates when only 3 trustee seats were term ending and opening. That was 2016, and there was no change in the state statute since that time, and it prevented voters from picking the 4th and 5th candidates in 22. Admin Fisher made that call while acting as town clerk and protest from the public and the printing of the ballots. Like I said last week, if Taylor really believed in democracy, integrity, and fair play, Taylor would have never run or taken the oath as mayor, and since the day he got the job, he should have immediately resigned from his trustee seat prior to the election, so all 5 seats would be filled today. Taylor should resign today, and the BOT should clean up the mess that Taylor, Fisher, and Madsen made and appoint Mulholland as mayor and Seitz and McAllister to the open trustee seats since they were just candidates in the election and just got shafted out of their seats. Questions that have yet to be answered: was Taylor planning on running against Larson for mayor or only after Larson chose, in air quotes, not to rerun for a second unconstitutional term? What day did Taylor apply for the out-of-state job? When did he first notify town staff of the possibility he would be moving east? Why did Taylor run when he was applying for and accepted an out-of-state employment in January? Why did town keep Taylor's out-of-state employment intent to leave Colorado from the residents? and who asked what day Taylor applied for and what day Taylor accepted an across-the-country job. Thank you.
So I have a question. Miranda, would you start the clock for questions, please? So I notice in your written testimony, which is actually expanded upon by your statement, that Taylor knew he was applying for out-of-state employment prior to January 4th, 2022. Taylor had randomly and with no context for public announced he was looking for employment at both the January 4th and January 18th BOT meetings. Fascinating, since if anyone were to listen to those recordings or to read those minutes, they would find no evidence that I said anything about any kind of job. So I have to ask you, from what source are you acquiring this detailed itinerary of my personal life that even I am unaware of?
So I believe Kathleen, it looks like she hung up.
Well, I suppose that answers the question. Anybody want to listen to those boring January 4th, January 18th meetings at 1.75 speed? Feel free to do so. There was no mention whatsoever of that. This statement is simply false. The statement that I knew I was going to change jobs in January is simply false. The idea that I knew before February that I was going to take a job outside of town is false. These are false statements. In British common law, the basis of modern American common law, there is a saying, falsus in uno, falsus in omnibus. It means when someone speaks fancifully in a serious place, we may assume they are speaking fancifully at all times. Would anyone else online like to speak?
So you have Mary Gerald has raised her hand.
Mayor Gerald. Ms. Gerald, please proceed.
Hi. I wanted to comment on the upcoming election and encourage the town to add some items as per our Envision 2030 resolutions to involve the public in some decisions. I'm sure the town can think of a few planning items that are maybe unclear to them about what the public thinks. These could be added to the election packet, either in September or November. And just as a follow-up, Julian, to your comment about you're quoting Latin, Kathleen did send some emails that you had exchanged with Miranda. I think it was in February, where you did talk about, pardon, in February?
No, you're right. Yes, go ahead, please. I'm sorry I interrupted. Didn't mean to.
In February, where you did have knowledge of the impending transfer and the openings on the board. So I think it's unwise for town officials to joke and try to show off how smart they are, how much smarter they are than people who call in. I'm pretty fed up with it. I've seen the comments that you made about Kathleen that she found through Cora. I know Chris Larson, you're following in his footsteps, but I find it repugnant. So I would like to get feedback, though, on my idea about adding some referenda to the elections. Thank you.
Ms. Gerald, would you answer some questions, please?
Surely.
Miranda, would you start the question clock? Thank you. So what do you suggest we add to the election, what topics are you specifically thinking of to add to the upcoming election questions? Or would you feel more comfortable sending us an email? I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't mind discussing it at the meeting. The first one, what are we going to do about downtown? Find some question that will help guide even the comprehensive plan in terms of, are we willing to go 3-story, or whether you want to vote on Ron's proposal. I think it's time that the town weighed in on that. Another one that comes to mind is, I understand there's some different ideas about access or emergency access in Big Springs. There have been a couple of routes discussed. That's something we could talk about. Also, the second bridge. I don't know whether that would tie in to the Ron Mitchell discussion, but these are things that the town has been struggling with for years. And instead of that, I know that the Planning Commission now has been tasked with this major overhaul of our animal code. And I really wonder why town makes such a mountain out of little molehills, why you don't write an ordinance for goats, which is the thing that's under consideration, and move into things that are really life changing in the event of a fire or an emergency, such as access, such as rejuvenating downtown. Those were my ideas.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gerald.
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to speak who's online?
So Jenny has her hand raised, and Jenny, I didn't want to butcher your last name, but if you can come off mute.
Thank you. It's Cargiulo, and even I pronounce it wrong most of the time.
Thank you.
Ms. Cargiulo, please speak.
Thank you. I wanted to take the opportunity to voice my support for the Fisherman's Wetland project.
Ms. Cargiulo, would you care to wait until comment while we're discussing that project?
Oh, is it on the agenda? I'm so sorry.
Certainly is, yes.
Oh, I can wait to comment then.
Excellent. I would suggest that because it would all be on topic and we'd all remember better and you'd be right there in the conversation. So anyone else wanting to speak on non-agenda items or online?
Christopher Larson has his hand raised.
Christopher Larson, please step in.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Board of Trustees. I feel like an addict who has relapsed after 2 short weeks here, speaking before you guys and coming back into a meeting. I thought I'd have a little bit more of a break. But I really want to speak out here first in favor of this new procedure, this idea of questions. I think this is a great new direction for the Board of Trustees. I think it's a great way to increase the public involvement, and I really appreciate Mayor Taylor and his idea and look forward to this experiment. Unfortunately, I'm calling in this evening to comment because once again, apparently I am living rent-free in Miss Chip-Eye's head and have been libeled in the packet and slandered here again this evening. So I just want to comment on a couple matters. First, on her discussion of what we supposedly knew long before we knew it. And I went back and I was looking, and it was very clear that Trustee Taylor texted me on January 28th that he had been laid off. I actually tried to get him to come work with me here at the university. Was unfortunately not able to do that. And he told me then on February 17th that he had come to the realization that he needed to move to the East Coast. So once again, as you know, as per usual, Miss Chip-Eye is trafficking in falsehoods and misinformation. And I think given what we've seen in our beleaguered democracy, not only in the last few years, but particularly this week, it is incumbent upon all of us to speak up against that. So I just wanted to lay out those facts. It is greatly unfortunate that Trustee Taylor knew that discovered that he would have to leave town prior to the election, but after the ballots were set and after the state constitutionally mandated deadlines. But I am very happy that the board is looking at a special election to fill Mayor Taylor's seat and as well as the open trustee seats here in the near future. Secondly, I just want to speak briefly to this nonsense of the previous time being non-constitutional. Ms. Chip-Eye continues to reference AG Salazar's 2005 ruling about term limits while ignoring the 2002 that says partial limits are not counted. So her belief that somehow everything we've done in the last few years is unconstitutional is yet again nonsense. I'm sorry to have to bring this, but thank you guys all for serving, and thank you again for this new opportunity for public involvement.
Do any of the trustees have any questions for Mr. Larson?
Just a big thank you for serving.
That was not a question. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, former Mayor Larson. Does anyone online wish to speak?
Michael Gonzer.
I'd like to respond to Julian Taylor asking me questions, which I unfortunately had got disconnected from.
Would you please cut her off? Thank you.
Michael Gonzer.
Michael Vonzer, would you please speak?
Good evening, all. My name is Michael Gonzer. I'm a relatively new resident of the town of Nederland. We moved here with my partner a couple of years ago, almost 2 years ago, on the Peak to Peak Highway. Excuse me. We love the town, living a great life here, and this is really my first BOT meeting that I'm in attendance at. I did vote in my first election this past year, so congratulations to the newly elected members, and good luck to the rest of the team. Obviously, as you serve, thank you for your service. Again, my first time here. A little taken aback, quite frankly, by some of the comments that have been made here tonight, and just a little quite interesting, I'll just say. My concern overall is what we are doing overall with the town. I'll say the redevelopment potential opportunities that we have here. Certainly, I've seen some of the plans, and I'm very excited about potentially what that might mean for the town going forward. First Street is one of my major concerns right now. Certainly, parking and the safety, sidewalks and parking and all of that. But overall, I'm very interested to again voice my opinion on going forward with a viable plan with that's for the betterment of the community as a whole. And I'm just going to listen in for the rest of the meeting here tonight, as long as I can stay. And again, thank you all for your service and your time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions? Thank you very much, Mr. Vonser, and thank you very much for participating. Anyone else online?
Yes, this is Kathleen, and I'd like to respond to Julian's question.
Are you going to answer my question?
What question can you specifically, what is the question, Julian?
How much
You're
of my
saying
question?
you didn't announce at the January BOT meetings that you were searching for a job that you've never had to done before. You didn't say that?
It was nowhere in the recording.
Well,
No.
guess what? That's why I make my own recordings of the meetings, thankfully. And I was in attendance in the meetings, and I know what was said. Because it was a red flag to me when it was said. And then
I was working for
it wasn't May 28th, like Chris Larson just said, that the email was sent.
Thank you. All right.
So there was a separate call-in user. I'd like to.
Another call-in user. Fine.
So I just want to make sure if you're calling in on the phone and you have not given public comment yet, to do *6 so you can do your public comment if you're interested.
I would like to finish answering Julian Taylor's question. And the fact that the email you sent on February 24th says you are leaving, but it wasn't going to be years as you had suspected. It was going to be months. So you definitely had the job before that, and you definitely, on the recording of the meeting that I make for myself, said that you were looking for a job in January.
January 4th, I was fully employed and had no interest in looking for another job. On January 18th, I actually made a joke about staying and working the creek.
About staying, you twice at BOT meetings, once in January and the first in February, said that you had applied for jobs. And that you chuckled about it, and I said to myself, why is Julian Taylor mentioning this at a Board of Trustees meeting? Completely out of context and had nothing to do with anything we were discussing. And that was a red flag to me, and I immediately...
I want you off. We're done. You have not answered my question. You
haven't answered mine. What day did you apply for an out-of-state job?
You are not telling me where you got that itinerary, because it was not from those.
Doesn't matter where I got it from, Julian. I quora request documents I'm staring at them. The February 24th document was obviously not the first time you told town staff that you were going to be taking an out-of-state job.
3 minutes just to continue speechifying, you need to stop.
Because my 3 minutes are up, or because you refuse to have this conversation?
Thing came up.
Okay,
So-
great. You still haven't answered when you applied for and took the job.
I accepted the, no, this is none of your business. The point is, I did not announce. When you say I announced, I did not know I was going to have to leave until after I was on the ballot, and I chose to come in because I was the only mayor running. That was my choice, and my personal decisions about my job have been announced when appropriate. Shall we move on? Very fine. We're moving on to the building department review, which is going to be announced by Miranda.
Yes. So back in, let me get my notes here. So we did a survey back in March that lasted kind of March to April. And just kind of point of clarification, we were asked to do the survey by Trustee Taylor at the time and Trustee Corvalin. I mentioned it in my staff report in March, so we would move forward with that. So we released it. We had 31 people participate in this survey, and the survey basically just asked you what your experience was with Safe Built. It kind of came at the heels of some people maybe feeling struggling with Safe Built, struggling with maybe that customer service, not fully understanding the plan review process. So we were looking to get feedback. It's in your packet. It's a bit mixed, as you'll see. So what we did is we met with Safe Built after we got the results and just kind of talked through what they were reading. They got the results firsthand, and they acknowledged that there were areas that they could improve, areas where we could maybe tighten things up between town and Safe Built. So I've outlined them here. Safe Built is interested in doing what they call design review committees. And what that means is that a person who has a permit or just has a dream, wants to brainstorm with us, can come to the table, meet with myself, Cynthia, Dan Wester, or someone from his team. Dan is here with Safe Built, our public works team, just whoever needs to be at the table. You have access to all of us at one time, which I think is, we do that for special events. So it's an opportunity to do that for building. We'd be looking to do that ideally twice a month on a set date and time, so people knew they could log into like a WebEx meeting and talk with us about their plans. In my discussion, we've been reached out to by other building type departments who, of course, are interested in our business, and we pay Safe Built 80% of every permit fee. Safe Built is willing to reduce that to 70 to be competitive with what other conversations we're having, and that's another adjustment they're going to make. We also talked extensively about solar and all the work that's going into solar and the desire to have quick turnaround time. There's obviously a solar subcommittee that's happening. So ways in which they can help us receive that silver designation for SolSmart, and they're very much on board with being innovative and how quickly they can turn around solar. Felt like it was a great meeting. We all walked away with some plans, but Dan is here tonight, and I'd love to invite him up to share with you a little bit about the experience with Safe Built in town. They've been with us for a very long time. So Dan, I'll let you have it. You have to talk into the mic for the people on web.
Trustees, thank you for having me here tonight.
It's kind of working.
It's kind of working. You want to sit over there?
Have a seat.
All right. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now.
All right. Thank you. Well, thank you for having me. I'm here to answer any questions you might have about Safe Built, or if you have any comments you want to direct to me or anything like that. I'd like to have this as an open discussion about Safe Built as your building department. I've been your building official since 2016. I think I was sworn in September. And so I've been here for a while. I was an inspector starting up here in 2011, in June of 11. So I've been familiar with Nederland for a long time. While I understand that this survey was brought out because of some maybe misunderstanding, to Miranda's point, of our plan review process. We do have a lot of success with the design review committees and meetings we hold with people who want to build something. They come in with is as extensive as a full set of plans or even a cocktail napkin idea. And to her point, to a dream you might have to see what it would take to build something in Nederland. And I think they're very productive meetings that we can have, that it lines out from all the different departments within the city or the town, whether it's fire department, planning and zoning, building department, public works, you know, what steps they're going to have to go through, not just building, and in the hurdles they got to cross to get their dream realized. So these meetings are very productive. People, I think, leave with a very good idea and a face, you know, on who to contact and how to move forward with particular building projects, regardless whether it's a basement finish, an addition, a full commercial build. I mean, I just think that they're very valuable meetings we have, and we do offer these. And I think it would be a good addition to Nederland moving forward. One of the other things that comes out of that is they can understand the plan review process, how long it takes, how many rounds of reviews it can take, whether you got a good set of plans, a good designer, a record, and, you know, those generally take 5 days for turnaround from us. Then it can be held up at your architect side for weeks, and then it comes back. So it really extends that out for months, it seems like. So, you know, these meetings help lay that out.
So I wanted to just offer to so Dan is of course here to answer questions. The question really before you is, what would you like to do? You know, do you want to continue this relationship with Safe Build and keep working with them as our building official and building department? Would you like us to go through the procurement process and get bids from other agencies that are looking to work with Nederland? Or do you want us to look at bringing this internally? Just so you know, some of my concerns with internal is space. We don't really have anywhere for people to go. Cynthia works from home the majority of the time because the annex building can't be used. And so while having staff is wonderful, we just don't really have a place for them. And so that is something we'd have to look into, much larger than just salaries. If the desire of the board was to start looking at what it would cost to bring a building official, a plan reviewer, and really an inspector, and they may not be all rolled into one. So.
Very fine. Would you accept some questions from the board then?
Sure.
All right. Does anyone on the board have any questions? Trustee Coombs Esmail, please.
Yeah, I found the results of the survey and kind of this whole aim to be really compelling, actually. Like everything was very tight, very close. The general sentiment does seem to be in the positive range, but with in terms of interactions with Safe Built that permit pullers and residents have had, rather than in the negative. So I think that that's something that we should note as a board. But it also seemed like maybe one of the reasons why, or at least the perceived reason why there have been troubles, is due to a lack of understanding. And this idea of the lack of understanding then brings into question, like, how do we improve understanding? And there was one and so this is not, I'm not saying Safe Built says this or that town says this, but there was a comment in anything else you care to share on the survey that caught my eye, and that was, I'm going to summarize here, the idea that this misunderstanding, stress, or more antagonistic relationship often gets directed at the town or the Safe Built inspector. And it says here, neither of which is responsible for educating a small business owner. So there was this idea that it is on the small business owner or the permit puller in general, on the resident who might own a home that they want to renovate or whatever it might be, to know everything in advance of their meeting with Safe Build or with the town. And I think that might be it might seem reasonable, but it might be unrealistic, right? And so we're going to continue having these stresses if there is not an educational component to this process. And I guess my question is, would you see those DRCs as potentially being a way to help educate folks who are pulling permits.
That's exactly what they're designed for.
Great.
Is to sit down and walk them through the whole process and answer any questions they may have, or fill in any blanks that, might have been missed.
Yeah. And then there's also the question of the kind of rapid turnaround that everyone, of course, wants. But again, even though it might seem reasonable for the scale of the project, it might be unrealistic in the context of reality, which always intervenes. So maybe if there was a way that we could ensure that people understood the timeline maybe more clearly, that would be helpful as well. And maybe the DRCs could help to do that. But I think town staff could also maybe be helpful in that regard.
So we actually do have it on our website of the turnaround time, and I know Cynthia shares that. It's interesting. So we have our own turnaround time of how long we're going to need to get it to Safe Build. It's usually between 1 to 3 days. Safe Build has 10 business days to turn around plan reviews. But as you'll note in the AIM, they're doing it in 4 to 5 days for residential and 2 days for commercial. So I do think there is a bit of misunderstanding of it's taking forever, and it's like, but their stats show otherwise. And so I do think frustration builds. Cynthia and I are very much in support of the DRCs because oftentimes we don't have the answer. And so I saw that there was a lot of frustration of you go to town hall and they say, I'm just the paper pusher or whatever. There was a comment like that. And there is a bit of truth to that. We enter in the permits, we kick them over to Dan and his team. So DRCs will help tremendously in pulling us all together. And also there's a whole utilities and public works side of this that I don't think people realize, that we have to bring in the fire department and all these other people. So you might as well just do it at one meeting where we all can sit down and talk through the permit.
I can also say that community core, one of the things we talked about, if we went online, it's a building permit program that we provide the town. And we want to go 100% online with that. So when somebody applies for a permit, they can also log in and they can see the process. Okay. And they can see the comments and they can see, how many days to review, and where it's at and they can see the comment letter that went back out maybe to their architect that they weren't privy to, because we generally have our plan review staff communicates with your designer, and so they can talk code to code. Right. And so they can read those comments. And a lot of times the time that it takes for a turnaround, we may get it out quick, but then there's a lot of conversation that happens between our plan reviewer and that architect. And it goes back and forth in many emails or phone calls. So there may be a week or two go by there that the building owner, they may not be privy to, but they can see that.
And I'm glad Dan brought that up. I actually did not put that in my AIM. So Community Core is a system that we enter in permits in on the back end. What's great about this is if we release it to be more public facing, is that person goes in and enters in their own permit. It takes out Cynthia or my time or Peter's time entering it. We go in and approve it, of course, before it goes to Safe Build. We're going to make sure everything is there. But it allows all of us to kind of communicate through that platform as well, because people don't have to call and say, like, where am I at with my permit? You can log into the system and go check yourself. And so North Glen has it if anyone wants to play around.
Oh, yeah. We've got a lot of our communities have it. And the other thing is every time it's touched, you get an email alert that lets you know that somebody's in there actively working on it, whether it's your designer of record, our plan review staff, town staff. So you get an update. And that kind of takes some of the gray area out of it.
Yeah,
But
that sounds like a functionality we could not provide in-house as a town.
No.
That would be quite impossible.
No.
I did have one other question, and that was just for my own understanding, because when we were looking at building codes this past year, we talked a lot about when like a review would be triggered in terms of maybe residential renovations, like at a certain percentage, then you would have to potentially update the entire structure. For a business, when there's a change of use, is there an automatic just code review that needs to be done at that building, and it needs to be up to code regardless of the percentage that's being renovated? Is that the case?
yeah, those are very good questions. Residential, there's no percentage. The code is written, any alteration to the building requires a permit, and that could be as simple as a narrative, a simple sketch of a floor plan. We do have handouts that you can fill out for residential. Commercial, when there is a change of use, yes, they are required to at least at minimum have a floor plan and a code analysis, okay? And at that point, somebody can give us a one-sheet floor plan and a code analysis, and we could make a determination, and that can happen in the DRC as well. That, listen, we're gonna need MEPs, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, building, accessibility, the whole gamut, or we can do as simple as change of use from maybe a business, like somebody was in there for a tax, okay, to a hair salon, okay? It's still a B to a B, but mechanical would come into play because of the air exchange that's in there. So it can be something we can dial back.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a lot of it is navigating, like there are residential one stops. It's like your re-roofs. There's things that can obviously move a little bit quicker, but sometimes someone's coming with multiple aspects to their project. And I think a DRC is a great opportunity to say, if you're doing a re-roof plus or redoing your kitchen and you want to add a retaining wall and all these things, then the scope of your project is going to vary so much. And then Safe Build's team can really guide them through exactly what we're looking for early on, and especially those change of use, change of occupancy. I know that that creates some confusion. We'd love to have an opportunity to sit down and make sure they understand not only the building, but also the business licensing and the fire inspection, because there are so many other components just even outside of building here that has to go into the process of a change of use or change of occupant.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there were a number of responses that indicated that they'd like to see some kind of provisional operations permit for businesses who are doing a change of use but have minor code violations that need to be addressed. I don't know how possible such
Yeah,
a
I
thing
read
is.
that one, and that one's going to be kind of sticky because when you have a change of use and you're going to go from a mercantile to a business, you need to finish all your changes and then get your certificate of occupancy before you can occupy the building. So it would be difficult. In fact, you couldn't do it. To do, let's say you want to be a business, okay, and a tax agency, and you want to come in there and take ownership of the building, take a certificate of occupancy, then apply for a commercial remodel and live through the dust and the chaos. You could do that if it wasn't a change of use. If it's a change of ownership and you want to do your remodel, you could do that. But a change of use, no.
Understood. Thank you. Those were my questions.
Those are good questions.
Anyone else on the board have a question? Trustee Blakemore.
One comment to start. Personally, I've had good experience with Safe Built.
Thank
I
you.
had solar panels put on my house by Namaste. I did not interact with Safe Built at all, and everything went really smoothly. And I didn't see any delays in the schedule. There was a unique case of having to put more connectors on the panels to the roof because of the wind load.
Right.
So it was a little bit unsure at first whether I could have solar on my rooftop or not, but we did get it to work out. So I'm wondering if you could characterize the dissatisfaction in the surveys in terms of the year, business versus remodel, new construction versus remodel, change of use. Did you see a pattern there at all?
Well, I looked at that survey, and while there's areas in there that I know we can improve, and we can get to that. To answer your question, I think probably the predominant one is a business moving. Whether they're moving into Nederland or moving somewhere within Nederland. Time is really, really important and really tight. And in this day and age with competition, they need to stay up and running, and there's no downtime for that. And they can't pay rent on two properties. The money's too tight. So I would guess that that's where a lot of, well, not just guess, I just know in all of our communities, that is one of our biggest. That's why we like to have these DRCs. Before you sign a lease, please come see us so we can explain the process to you of what you're looking at for a building permit to make what you want happen. So you can be better prepared for it. But a lot of times we find out too late when they're paying rent on 2 properties, and it just doesn't happen overnight. So that's where I would say that's one of our biggest tripwires is moving businesses.
Yeah, so I would say being clear on expectations is a good thing to do.
Right.
And it sounds like with the DRC meetings, that'll help in that case.
And I did mention too, reading that survey, places where we can improve, consistency. We have 4 inspectors that roll out of my office, including myself, makes 5. We try not to what we call pile on, or, you know, when an inspector's been to your property and done an inspection, don't make a new list for them. You're there to check the things that they need to fix, unless we find something that was life safety that somebody missed. We have to write that down. So consistency, and that's just the guys go out together, but we're just stretched so thin like everybody else. But the guys go out together, you know, they read each other's notes before they go, ask questions about it. Just consistency is where one of our biggest that I saw in there.
Oh.
And then education
Mm.
to town folk.
Then I have a suggestion, and that is to make a survey available to whoever pulled the permit that they can fill out after the final approval of construction. Do this anonymously, and then aggregate the results, maybe yearly, as a way to measure improvement over time.
Yeah. You know, if anybody's been here that built a long time ago in 16 and before, at the bottom of all of our inspection tickets before we went electronic, at the bottom of your inspection ticket, there was a little website down there that says for anonymous survey, how your inspection went, your job went. It was on the bottom of every one of our inspection tickets. And we used to get a lot of feedback on that. But since we went electronic with all of our inspections, we need to put it back on, at least on our inspection cards. And I don't even know if that portion of our website's still up and running, but that's a great,
And Dan, if needed, we could always just put back into place our Google survey and use that if you don't have access to that on your end. But I think that's a great idea, Trustee Blakemore.
but we used to have that on there, and we used to get a lot of really good feedback on that.
Thank you, Trustee Blakemore. Trustee Mahold.
Question for you, Dan. First of all, we had a great experience too. I was delighted.
Thank you.
But the question is, you work with a number of towns, and you look at all their code. Is there anything in our code that is especially problematic that you want to bring to our attention or flag for us?
No, we try to make our recommendations demographic only is the only amendments we like to make, for wind, snow, you know, your location on this earth. That's really the only amendments. Otherwise, we like to stick to the black and white, the way it's written.
And we did involve Safe Built in the building code amendments. We actually did miss wind load, so it's going to come back to you as an amendment because somehow it got lost. But they were involved in the process when we were navigating the switch. And there was a long debate about, is it 18 or is it 21? I think we ultimately landed on 18 because that had been used a few times over by other municipalities. But I think we'll always, as we look at amendments, Safe Built will be one of the first people we consult to make sure that it makes sense.
One of the things that people are trying to write now is the 21 codes, but they're stretching out to the 24 for energy code. And you're seeing that a lot. Boulder, Superior, you've seen that all in the news in Superior. Lafayette, they're what they call energy stretch codes. I'm on 3 different coalitions for that. And energy codes are going to be a really big ticket item for homeowners, business owners to comply to. But I think we slowly get them there, and we try to, because we moved from the 12 to the 18. If we try to move at least every 6 years, or maybe even sunset it and move every 3 years and try to stay up with the codes and not do the rubber band thing, to answer your question on code recommendations, that would be one that I would highly be in support of we did it adoption we stay behind it. Like right now, the 24s are being written. I would say we do the 21 and we let the 24s get to at least the third printing. And so we don't do it immediately in 24 when it drops, but maybe in 26 and then before 27 is written, but kind of stay a few years behind, but not right on the heels, but not 6 years behind again.
Do any other trustees have questions?
Hello, I'm here.
Certainly. Trustee Corvallin.
Yeah, you're supposed to call on everybody. I just was when I was going through all the surveys, the common threads for the criticisms were, you know, that they keep getting different people that come up on the different days, that because you only come up on certain days, that and if there's like a storm, whatever, it can put things back by a week or two. That, you know, like one inspector will say this is wrong, and then they'll come back, another one will add, you already addressed kind of a little bit, will add on to it, and then they got to come back again. Things of that nature. How can you improve this so that these complaints stop coming in?
Well, that's just with continuity and my staff. I've got a pretty tight staff now, and we've had a lot of turnover through COVID and people retiring. But the staff that I got now, and for the most part, we try to work through that in-house, and we get there. But I can tell you right now, I've got, you know, out of the 4 guys I got, 2 are fairly new to my office. So we just need to, you know, they're not inexperienced.
I mean, can
inspectors.
you like assign one person to a job so that there's a continuity and a relationship that's being developed, so you're not constantly like starting over with new people?
Yeah, that's been explored, and it's not as easy as it may sound, but I will make a commitment to you that even if we do send somebody different, they read the notes. That's why we used to have the inspection cards on the job and they would fill them out, and now everything's online. So we used to get the inspection card and just flip it over, and then we'd go down and see what corrections were there to do. And a lot of times with this electronic, it's really tripped up a lot of people. So I will make that commitment to you from this survey and from the experience from the past that we get all on the same page with the notes that have been left.
And then the other is a comment that Eric had addressed. It has more to do with town of Nederland than you guys, but the whole change of use, it sometimes seems a little excessive when there isn't a whole lot being done. And you know, the need for all the architect drawings, and I'm just wondering if there's any way the town of Nederland can rethink some of these change of use requirements.
I think that this DRC, when we can sit down, we could talk about this, and we can get at minimum, before you go out to an architect, we get at minimum, to pay for a stamp is expensive. To get an architect to draw you a floor plan and a code analysis, and he doesn't have to stamp them, he or she doesn't have to stamp them, can be at a discounted rate. If we could start with a code analysis and a floor plan on a change of use, we can probably get a long way down the road to understand on both sides of the table what we're going to need. And if the job has less than 10 occupants in it, and that's by square foot, not by declaration, they don't need to be stamped, so you can save money on architectural firms that way. So there are ways we can talk about that in a DRC. So I would
Now, do non-load bearing walls added require then architectural drawings? I mean, for a change of use?
no, they don't. If somebody knows how to draw them, but if it's an occupant load of 10 or more, the Colorado Revised statutes require by law that they're drawn and stamped by a registered design professional in Colorado. So if it's
Right.
less than 10, somebody could do it themselves, but they do need to know what they're doing.
Yeah, I just feel like I just know that like the people who go the right way and let town know what they're up to get thrown through the ringer, and the people that don't, who just do it and open, obviously get done a lot quicker and they don't have to deal with it. I just feel like it would be, if there's any way to make it more beneficial for people to go about it the right way. I think people are scared to even let town know what's up, because of month delays. And, I mean, there's been in the survey, people are saying that like canceling, like if you guys were to cancel, but you only come up 2 days a week, can you make a commitment that if you're the one that cancels, that you will prioritize them
Sure.
instead of like pushing them back? I mean, it just feels like, just because that's the only real advantage to having a local inspection is that everyone's already on site, everybody lives in town, you know the guy, it's the same guy, and you have a relationship. But I feel like people who are the ones that are not happy don't feel like they have a relationship and don't feel like they're being heard and feel like they're being pushed back by weeks or months, because there isn't that relationship. So I really think people need to feel connected to your company more and you guys need to be responsible for deadlines.
Okay. I think we tried to meet we do meet our deadlines predominantly on our plan review. We asked for 5 days for residential and 10 days for commercial, and we try to hit those marks, and we've been pretty good at hitting them. As far as the cancellation of inspections, if we've canceled it, by all means, you have every right to ask for us to, if that's something we had to cancel, and I'm not sure why we would ever have to do that, but if we did, you have every right to an appointment after that. And we'll make
Right.
good.
Okay. Well, thanks.
You bet. And as far as people opening up without a permit, that happens everywhere. And
It just seems like the easier way,
It is.
because of nightmare
It-
stories I hear about people being
it is,
pushed
but
back opening day by months.
yeah, it is, but it can be very dangerous. It can be costly in the end if there's an accident. Insurances are getting very, very, very savvy to code. They do know how to read a code book. We're starting to see in this fix and flip era down on the valley floor, house fires, that they call the building department, ask for the open records request. When was the last permit pulled? We don't have any. I don't know what happens to that, but I have heard horror stories that somebody's just
Oh.
out without.
Yeah.
Insurance
see that.
companies are getting real savvy to building codes.
And Trustee Corvalin, I just wanted to really reiterate, obviously, the internal planning and building department, which is really myself and Cynthia, and Peter supports us. We're just as committed to trying to help people understand the process, definitely be connected to these DRCs. We try to go above and beyond in our communication to making sure they're getting connected to the right people, but we also recognize there's always ways that we can fine tune too. So I think for us, this survey was more than just safe built. It was really an opportunity for as town staff for us to assess how we can improve the way in which we connect people to safe built, or the way we support them through the process, because sometimes they don't need a lot of safe built involvement, and it's really town, and we can get them through it.
Yeah, it seems like it should be more of that, where, you guys could guide and say, if you just do this instead of that, then you don't have to do this particular expensive improvement that Safe Built's going to make you do.
So we're not building technicians. So we're not permit technicians. We're not building technicians. We don't have any of that expertise. And I wouldn't want Cynthia to provide any of that guidance because she does not have that expertise, which is why we referred to Safe Built.
You know what, though? I will say this, though. I work with a lot of communities, and Nederland is by far the top for the support that they, you know, what they know, the support that they give. They're very low maintenance when it comes to our side of it. And I'm not just here buttering my bread. That is, you guys are very low maintenance. Cynthia tries really, really hard.
Anything else, Trustee Corvallin?
No.
All right. Thank you, Trustee Corvallin. This is a discussion item, so we will bring it to the people in the room first and then to the people online. Does anyone in the room currently have any comments regarding the Safe Built study? Seeing no one, it's a lot easier to tell when they're here. Seeing no one, let's turn to online. Is there anyone online who has any comments regarding the Safe Built study?
Just a reminder, if you're on the phone, *6.
I would like to make comments.
Please proceed.
Kathleen Chip-I, 30-year resident, 18-year business owner. I'm thankful that I opened my business before any of this occurred with Safe Built. And it's not Safe Built's problem. It's the town of Nederland adopted the International Building Code. And until that moment, change of use meant you wanted to do something that you weren't zoned to use by right for. So I want to open something industrial in a retail zoned use by right. I would have to, that's a change of use, and I would have to go through a special use review, and then the building inspections and all that would get involved, of course. That didn't occur. When I got my business license, how the code was written, I walked down to town hall, I gave the form.
We lost audio for a minute.
I paid the money, and I went and started painting the inside of my retail business. Now, my problem is nobody is understanding. The International Building Code disregards all use by right of buildings that already have occupancy that's permitted. And the example is the business next to me. Used to be Raven, who was retail, and she sold things out of the retail on First Street. She left, and Josh Pepper tries to move in to sell plants. He's also doing retail, just different type of retail. He's selling something different. He has a use by right to do retail. He had to fill out a building permit with Safe Built because the International Building Code uses the terminology change of use and change of occupancy interchangeably, when that has never occurred in Nederland before. I don't think the Board of Trustees, I begged you guys, and I thought, and it wasn't this board, it was previous boards to this, to understand that when you adopt the International Building Code, you are basically getting rid of zoning and use by right, because now everyone is a change of occupancy. And in the International Building Code, change of occupancy means change of use. In the town of Nederland, change of use meant you wanted to do a business that did not have a use by right to be operating there. And, this is why I was against the adoption of the International Building Code. One of the reasons. The other reason is the reason only the United people in the United States and one other country use it is because it's so expensive to implement. And here we're saying we want to have sustainable growth, and it has to be economically sustainable, but now you need $8,000 for an electric car charger that you don't have an electric car for. You need $30,000 in indoor sprinkler systems that aren't going to save buildings if there's a serious fire up here. And you have a $30,000 water tap fee, whether it's a tiny house or a regular house. So the town is strangling itself in its own development, in its own growth, in its own businesses opening without these kind of harassing things. There is no change of use from retail to retail. At least there never was, and there shouldn't be. And somebody should be able to, on the spot, like the code says, the Nederland Code, you go fill out the form, you hand it in, you get your license upon receipt, because you have a use by right to do retail in a retail zone. So I really, whatever discussions, I would like to participate because I'm just trying to get things moving. And we keep strangling our own businesses, our own residents. And my only interactions with Safe Built was finding them to be doing unwarranted house searches with ex-admin Alicia Reese.
Minutes and
And
beyond.
once I pointed it out, they stopped.
Does anybody on the board have any questions for Ms. Chipai?
I have a question for someone who understands the International Building Code here. I'd like to hear their
Very fine.
feedback
Is-
on what's required for
So,
business.
Trustee Blakemore, I'd like to make sure that no one has a question
Okay.
specifically for the speaker first. I am not hearing anyone who has a question. Very fine.
But
let's
I
move on.
I do second Karen. I would like more information about this whole change of
Absolutely.
use, change of occupancy stuff.
Trustee Blakemore, please
Yeah.
proceed.
Oh,
Do you want
okay.
to, sorry, do you really quickly, do you want to finalize public comment before you move on to further discussion? I would recommend you do. Well, there are other call-in users, so I want to make sure that there's *6 and everyone knows that they.
Terribly sorry. I was waiting for a question from the board for Ms. Chipai, then I became confused, and now you are bringing me back.
We're back
to
in it.
earth. I am now not confused. Does anyone else online have something to say about the Safe Built survey? No one? Very fine. Then we bring it back to the board. Trustee Blakemore, please proceed.
I guess this question is for Tom with Safe Built. What sort of permit is required if you're changing the what you're selling at a business?
The life safety is all. All we require is a life safety. If it's going to go from mercantile to mercantile, retail to retail, we ask that they pull a life safety permit, and then that puts the fire department, building department to walk through the building to make sure over the last 20 years that the building hasn't become remodeled without permits or become unsafe. And that's all. And it's generally a 10-minute walkthrough and we're done. But I do want to address her confusion about change of use and change of occupancy. I wish they would fix that in the international building codes, because occupancy classification is your business, your mercantiles, your assembly use for churches, restaurants and bars. That is your occupancy classifications, but they call it a use. And zoning is allowed by use, like she said. And so if it's allowed by use in this district, then, that's allowed by use, but that's just through zoning. Then we need to talk about the use through building permit. And it's very confusing. So I think maybe we create a document. We have shared one with you that we have them fill out. It's a change of use, but maybe we change it to a zoning application that when somebody's wanting to take keys to a front door, they fill it out. What are you using the building for? Do you know what it was used for before? What are you storing in there? What kind of business you doing in there? It's just a simple 1-page deal. You fill it out both sides, but it's a single piece of paper. And they fill it out. They can fill it out online. And then it goes around the horn to all the different departments to determine whether it's allowed by use and if it's going to be a change of use. And I wish they'd fix that to change of occupancy classification. And for moving forward, that's what the conversation we need to have, that as a change of occupancy classification.
And we do on our business, obviously, this is typically a business. So when you go to apply for your new business license, it does ask you, what was the former use of this space? And is it different than what you're doing? And then in which case you would mark like, yes, this is a change of use. And that then prompts you to then contact the building department. But I do agree it is confusing and
It is very
ways for us.
confusing.
And I think DRCs, again, big fan of the DRCs. I think they can offer some of that clarification.
And that application that we have too, that you guys send around, that's very helpful. That you fill it out, they send it down to us in an email. We look at it the day we get it, and we make our comments that either we need just a simple life safety, or we need a floor plan with a code analysis, because they're taking it to a different occupancy classification of that building. And yeah, that's very confusing.
Very fine. So having brought it back to the board, do any other board members have any questions?
Can I just, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I've got one. This is regarding the same topic we were just on. It sounds like the change of use can be problematic, or is at least written poorly in the international code. Is it a take it or leave it as a whole? Do you have to take the whole thing, or are we free as a town to go back and look at that independently or separately?
We could probably have a discussion about it, but I don't see any way around it. I just don't. In all my years of doing this, I just don't. When you,
Okay.
because egress, if you're going to put people in, let's say a restaurant, you're going to have a lot of people in there, okay, compared to a mercantile. So egress is going to change. Your egress components, you know, how quick you can get out of a building, how quick fire department can get there, you know, so you might have sprinkler systems involved in different types of occupancy classifications. So we just need to know what's happening in there. And I think we boil it back down to, we ask for a floor plan and to get a general idea of what they're doing in there. And then we can have that conversation. How far do we need to take it beyond that? But to amend that out of your codes, I just don't see it.
Thank you very much. I'm terribly sorry.
Dan.
Thank you very much, Dan. I would like to bring it back to the board. If there are no more questions, Trustee Corvallin, do you have any additional questions for Dan?
No, thanks.
Very fine. Then I would like to bring it back to the board, and I'd like to excuse you, Dan. Thank you very much for your answer
Okay.
to our questions.
All right.
And I
Thank you
greatly
for asking.
appreciate your participation. I'd like to bring it back to the board with a concentration on the next steps, because that's kind of what we're talking about here. We've heard from Dan, so we've heard what Safe Built is willing to do. We have read the survey, which was certainly not damning, but also not exemplary. There were problems, and there were also people had very good experiences. So I'd like to go around the board and ask your opinions regarding the next steps that are listed. And those next steps are continue to contract with Safe Built at the 70% rate with additional DRCs, with addition of DRCs. Number two, follow the town's procurement policy and release an RFP to see what other agencies have to offer. And number three, evaluate what it would cost to bring a building official, inspector, and plan reviewer on internally as town staff. So I'd like to begin with Trustee Corvallin. Trustee Corvallin, your thoughts on those next steps?
Well, I think it's ideal to be in-house for reasons of communication and personal abilities. But I hear Miranda saying there's not a physical location for this to occur at the moment, even though I think cost-wise it would be similar. Plus, with ongoing staffing issues, would we even be able to staff an inspection staff? I don't know. So with that in mind, I would probably just say we continue with Safe Built sort of probationary and see how the next year goes. We could get other quotes or whatnot, but I feel like we probably will have the same problems, because if they're not local, there's going to be problems of having different people showing up. I mean, I just think that's just the worst, to have different people showing up every time, starting over, explaining everything again. But so I really don't feel like that's going to change. And I feel like the change of use issues, well, I initially thought it was like a local problem that we could fix within ourselves, but it sounds like it's a international code, so we'd have to like totally change our code to be able to be more accommodating for businesses. So that I really don't know what to do about. Because I really think it's horrible how difficult we make it for businesses to succeed in this community. And I think town, all of us should think about how we can make it easier for businesses and stop putting so many hurdles for them. So in a nutshell, I would suggest we just stay with Safe Built unless there was a majority that wanted to go internally, and then I could be convinced. because I do think that's better. All around, I think that's better.
Thank you, Trustee Corvallin. Trustee Coombs Esmail.
I mean, generally speaking, I like the idea of town services being offered by town and not being contracted to private companies or third parties of any kind. Just in general, I mean, I even am a little squeamish about Boulder County sheriffs enforcing town code overnight, right? And that doesn't necessarily sit that well with me, but there is a reality to the situation, and that reality is that town does not have the capacity to offer the kinds of services that Safe Build offers. And in fact, it could end up being much, much worse of a situation if we are putting that on town. If town can't staff the positions, then there will be no inspector. Then what do we do? Talk about turnaround time, right, in that context. And so I do think that in many ways, this relationship does safeguard the town. And it also, I think by contracting outside with these kinds of experts, there is some level of external authority there that also protects the town from being browbeaten into submission on certain issues. Because, I mean, we're talking about all of this as if it's just a matter of dollars and cents and that it's just about expense incurred by residents, homeowners, or potential business owners. But I mean, this is also a very serious situation. I mean, there have been so many instances of horrible tragedies that have occurred because buildings were not properly outfitted. We have generally across the country a problem with air circulation inside, and that's why we are constantly getting sick and being exposed to toxic chemicals. So, I mean, there is a reality here that I think we haven't really addressed, and that is that this is a matter of life safety, and we do want to avoid tragedy, and we do want to avoid business owners who might, knowingly or not, be putting their potential customers at risk by being open in a building that is unsafe. So I just wanted to make sure that that's said, that we are aware that this is really what we're talking about here, and that's what the expense covers. And it can even in the long run be much better for that business owner if they are up to code and something like that doesn't happen, or if it did, they're at least covered from a liability standpoint because they were not in flagrant disregard of the law. So it seems to me that continuing with Safe Built at the 70% rate is the way to go in all of that context, even though, again, I feel squeamish about third parties enforcing town code.
Thank you, Trustee Coombs Esmail. Trustee Mahold. I'm sorry, Mayor Pro Tem Mahold.
Thank you, sir. First of all, I think you did a great job on the rate. I haven't had anything that's 8% lower this year than it was last year for me. We've got 715 structures in this town. That's it. It's pretty hard, and it's a similar problem that we have with water. You're spreading the costs over very few. So I think trying to do it in-house, I think we'd find very quickly that was cost prohibitive, even space aside, to have to employ that level of service. So I think these 715 structures, some of them are quite funky. And I think there's something to be said for a continuity of service. Dan said he's been working with many of these structures since 2011. That's worth a lot when somebody comes in and says, I want to pull a permit to add on to it. I would like to have somebody in there who's walked that structure before and who knows what to expect. I really like the idea of the upfront consultation, having been through this process. I think Cynthia was really good with us on the residential side of number one, saying here's what you're going to be up against from a zoning standpoint. Here's how you're going to have to build given what we know is under the ground. I felt like we were dealt with really fairly. I also think that I agree with Trustee Corvallin that we need to make it easy for businesses within the bounds of safety. People get killed when corners get cut, and I strongly disagree with the concept that it's easier just to go out and build on your own and not pull a permit. I think that's criminal. It is criminal, and people get killed that way. And I'm delighted to see insurance companies that are putting their capital on the line are taking a hard look at code and making sure that it was followed on the way in. So it's, you know, the Safe Build's job is a fiduciary responsibility. We have to remember that. It's not to be my friend. The inspectors is there to make sure code is followed and that the building is safe and that we built it, we didn't cut any corners from our plan. And from my experience, it was a good experience. It was painful at times, but it was my mistakes and they were caught. So I appreciate it. I think there's an expense associated with going out to bid. I wouldn't encourage it. I think that, you know, given the size of our town, the number of structures we're talking about, and just the, you know, I don't think there's more than 30 lots, Miranda, that could be built on at this point. So we're not going to have a building boom. I just think, you know, I think we're going to, I'm pretty happy with the relationship and I would continue it.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Mahold. Trustee Blakemore.
So I agree with a lot of what everyone has said already. I think it would be a good idea to continue with Safe Built for continuity and for their expertise that they have. I was pleased to see that the town and Safe Built have worked together to come up with some improvements to address some of the issues from the survey. Those are the DRC, the 70% reduction in fee, and the evaluation surveys moving forward. So my preference would be to choose number one, which was continue with Safe Built with the reduced cost in the DRC meetings, and I'd like to add the surveys in there too.
Thank you very much, Trustee Blakemore. So Miranda, do you feel that you have guidance on this?
Yes. And so we'll do, and one thing you really can't see this, sorry, but one thing that's on here is a press release that we want to do with Safe Built, acknowledging that relationship and also discussing some of these upcoming changes. And so you will expect to see a lot of push from us about how to get on Community Core and how to do the DRCs and all of those things. But I do just want to thank Dan Wester. He's, you know, I've been here for a couple of years and he's been amazing to work with. His team has been wonderful to work with. And so we feel very confident that we can move past some of the, maybe the more challenging things in this survey and just make it that much better for people pulling permits.
Very fine. And I'll join with Miranda. Dan, thank you very much. And perhaps the next board, Trustee Blakemore, please proceed.
Do we need to vote on this as an action item?
Not necessarily. Yeah, I was really just looking for a vote if you were looking to do 2 or 3 and you wanted to provide, like, especially that RFP. But look, I'm kind of just getting the nod of 5 that were.
If there had been controversy within the board, I would have asked for a nod of 4, but I don't think that's necessary. I think we all said the same thing, essentially.
Yes.
And perhaps for the next board in a year or 2, just to check up to see how these changes have worked. Just a thought.
And Safe Built does intend to do quarterly board updates, right, Dan? Yes.
Very fine. That sounds wonderful.
Cool.
Thank you very
Thanks.
much.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dan.
Now let's move on. Let's move on to Fisherman's Lot Wetlands Project. Miranda, you're introducing this.
Yes, and I'm just going to do a really brief introduction because I did borrow quite a bit of this language in my aim from Rhea. So I'd like to then turn it over to Rhea. But just kind of a quick overview. So in 2019, Eldora Mountain Ski Resort entered into an agreement with the town of Nederland to develop Fisherman's Lot as a wetlands. Obviously, a lot of things have happened since 2019, and there are a variety of different delays that led to them not being able to move forward with the project, but that was the commitment. There's been a lot of conversations about parking or potentially other needs for different town-owned parcels. And so in understanding that that is something that town is facing, Eldora does have an opportunity to utilize a wetland bank instead of creating the wetlands, which would allow them to kind of pay into this bank system. But I'll let Brent Tregaskis and Ray Orthner explain that more. So I'd like to go ahead and turn it over to them to present what options are before them. They did go before ProSab and SAB, who both felt like that we should move forward with the wetlands. And I'd love if Trustee Coombs Ismail and Mayor Pro Tem Mahold shared a little bit more about that. But Rhea and Brent, if you're there, I'd love to turn it over to you.
Yeah, we're both here. Thanks for having us. It's been a few years since this project was discussed with the Board of Trustees, and really, I'm Rhea Ortner. I'm an ecologist and botanist, a consultant for Eldora and Ignite. We really just wanted to come before the town again to make sure that that is really what you want to do with that lot. It just seems like over the years, everyone talks about potential other uses. It's still a good project. Now there's another option to buy wetlands off-site, what's called a wetland bank. And that is called Warm Springs Mitigation, and that's located next to High Creek Fen in Park County, which is run by the Nature Conservancy. So it's also a good project. So I don't have a presentation. Brent may want to say a few words, but really we're here to answer questions. I think everything's really in the packet. And Brent, maybe you want to say a few words as well?
Sure. Am I muted again?
You're unmuted now.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Brent Tregaskis. I'm the president and general manager up at Eldora. And, I would just add a couple points. We went into this 3 years ago. Now's kind of our last chance to turn back time if the Board of Trustees wanted to. We have had some, feedback that some of the public would rather keep that parking or think there's a higher and better use for it. And now's kind of our last chance. 3 years ago, we did not have an opportunity to buy wetlands credits out of a bank. So we worked with the Board of Trustees at that time, which is primarily different than today, I realize. But, we're willing to do the project. It just it seemed like there was some feedback that we should make sure everybody still wants to do the project as designed. The couple points were, the one advantage to doing it out of a bank is we write a check and then the wetland bank, credits that to our project. And it's really for the Ignite Ski School, by the way. The adaptive ski school building is what we call it. They're the ones that are driving the bus on this project. They fund the kind of startup money to get it going. That was why we're doing it. We put it in the wetlands because of an ADA issue of having a bridge unload right directly to the chairlift off of the third floor that the county has worked with us on. So it's a really cool project for adaptive folks. And we plan on breaking ground next year. The advantage for us or for the town is the town has committed to helping us with the project, with some heavy equipment, backhoes and dump trucks, and helping us do it. And then it takes about a 5 to 6 year window to establish the plants and kind of keep the thing going. And then essentially it turns over to the town. So there's a little bit of liability. I wouldn't oversell that, but there's some liability down the road to town to continue to manage that after it gets signed off by the Army Corps of Engineers. And it was the Army Corps of Engineers that suggested to Rhea that there is now a bank in our district, so to speak, even though it's not in our watershed here in Nederland, but it is something we could do at a 2-for-1 level, 2 acres for every one that you developed. And this is a really small project. It's literally like 0.22 of an acre. So it's not even a quarter of an acre. But, we heard from both ProSab and SAB. They definitely support the project and think it's a cool project. There is certainly a few parking spots that are lost, and it's right down by Barker Reservoir. If you're not familiar with it, I think you guys have enough information to make an intelligent decision. But what we're coming tonight for is I need to tell the bank soon, like tomorrow, if we're going to buy the credits or not, because I've got them kind of on hold, because we thought there was a very good chance that you guys would like to get out of it. So we've kind of got them on hold, anticipating, whether we're going to stick with plan A or switch to a bank project. So I hope we can answer any questions. I mean, Ray is the expert in this. It's going to take, it'll take several years to get it going. Most of the liability is down the road, if you want to call it liability, or just kind of maintenance of it, because at some point the Army Corps of Engineers signs off, and then it's property owned by the town. So hopefully that's as clear as we could make it without going into a lot of details. I think you've been given some more details on that, but Ray and I'd be happy to answer any questions from the board.
Thank you very much. So we'll bring it to the board. Anyone who has questions, let's start with Trustee Blakemore. Questions or comments?
I have a question for the town about using town equipment for this project. Is that in the plans or?
So it's not in the plans. Obviously, again, this was on hold, so we would not be able to do anything this year. And I think the challenge, of course, this year is staffing, and so we'd want to make sure that we had the robust staffing and the equipment. I don't know, Nikki Dunn, Parks Manager here, if you have anything else to add.
Yeah, we're very full on our schedule this year with GoCo and a few of our other projects, and streets is not fully staffed at all. And that is a big concern with doing it this year. I have better hopes for next year of us being able to participate in that kind of activity.
I think obviously if we moved ahead, we would then sit down with Rhea and Brent and kind of map out a tentative timeline when our teams would be needed so that we understood the capacity within ourselves of, is it all hands on deck and it's, utilities and parks and streets coming together, but we have to know what that timeline looks like, and integration now would be tough.
Yeah.
Oh.
If I'm not still muted, I would just echo our plan would be to break ground almost exactly a year from now. We don't plan on breaking ground this year. We still don't have the final permit for the building, but we would break ground April or May of this coming year on this project. And that was back when Chris Pelletier was in charge and Karen from the town. And so we had an agreement basically that we would do this kind of in a cooperative effort. So we've got a year to plan it out basically.
That's all the questions I have. I have quite a few comments, but I think I'll wait until we come back again.
All right. Thank you, Trustee Blakemore. Mayor Pro Tem Mahold.
Yes, question for Rhea. Okay, so let's project ourselves a year ahead. The plants go in. What kind of risk profile do we have on those plants taking? And are we fairly confident that they will? And my walk of the property just before I came over here tonight, it looks like an ideal wetland because it's between two sets of running water. How close to an ideal wetland is it? And is 0.22 acres too small to make an impact?
So creating wetlands is an art as much as a science. And just to start from the beginning, what would be happening is we would dig down the existing parking lot into the seasonally high groundwater table. We did do a preliminary backhoe pit and found some good topsoil down there. So basically we'd be stripping away the top kind of parking lot fill, the bad stuff, getting it to the right grade. It's basically, in the beginning, to be honest, it's going to kind of look like a big hole in the ground. If you look at the grading plan that Miranda has on her up on the presentation, it's going to slope down, 4 or 5 feet. There's going to be a bench that we're going to plant with willows, and then the center will be herbaceous plants. This is required to be monitored by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers for 5 years. There are certain performance standards that we have a certain plant cover of the plants we want, not obnoxious weeds, that a certain number of shrubs survive and all that stuff. So there's a great deal of confidence that it will work because that is required. And so if we have plant losses, if a moose or an elk gets in there and eats up a bunch of stuff, we have to replant. So that's not a concern. In terms of overall impact, 0.22 acres, less than a quarter of an acre. I mean, it's not a big area. I don't really know the big scheme of things. I guess it's not a lot, but it's still a good project. I think it's a good, also a good educational opportunity, as some other boards have pointed out. We'll do our best. Does that answer your questions?
It does. Thanks very much. The hole in the ground phase, is that going to be a season or 2 seasons? How long will it be?
Yeah, it could be a couple years. And those steep banks, we're going to be putting down, a revegetation mix and putting erosion control blankets down there so they don't slough off. But I think, it'd probably be smart to put up some signage on saying exactly what is going on. Oh, and we're not directly connecting to the creeks because we didn't want any chance the creeks could sort of jump their banks and erode a new channel through this area. So it's really, we're hoping to intercept the high groundwater table, but not actually the actual stream flow.
Perfect. That answers my question. Thank you.
Trustee Coombs-Esmail.
I had the opportunity to ask quite a number of questions on the ProSab board, so I'll share kind of our conclusions and how we came to that later on. But thank you, Brent and Rhea, for being here tonight.
Trustee Corvallin.
What will town's responsibilities be in the next 5 or 6 years and in the future for maintenance? For building it, is town going to be involved? Are they the ones, are we volunteering, or is this part of the money that's being paid in, or is town being paid to do this backhoe work? Or it just our budget, and what do you think the overall budget implication would be for this project?
I'm not sure if that question was for me. I think some of the earth
it's
moving.
whoever knows.
Yeah, we would be would be hiring consultants, likely my company, to do the planting and seeding and monitoring. They may use some of their own staff, and I think they're hoping to have an agreement with town to do some of the earth moving if possible. But I'm not really privy to those details. So perhaps Miranda or Brent knows.
As I understand it, based on what Chris Pelletier and Karen Garrity put in place, it was in kind. And Brent, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that was our contribution to this project.
Yeah, I believe that, I would estimate that when Ray and I kind of put this together 3 years ago, we figured this project could cost $60,000 or $80,000 by the time it's done. I think that most of your upfront costs from the city perspective, I can't imagine it would be $10,000 in-kind services. Because it probably the dig won't take long. We were out there with a backhoe with Chris, digging the potholes 3 years ago just to kind of make sure it's viability. I think the longer term thing is down the road. It's like at some point when the Army Corps of Engineers 5 or 6 years from now signs off on it, then it's up to the city to quote maintain it, and we kind of wash our hands of it. If some of the plants don't take, Eldora has to pay for that. We don't expect you guys to be paying for plants or Rhea's time. It was mostly just the heavy lifting of digging the hole and hauling off the earth, which I'd be happy to take the earth, but Chris seemed to have some good spots for good topsoil that he would love to have. So he was willing to do that because there's obviously need for good soils. So I think that's probably my best guess, and that's just a guess or a stab at it.
Okay, thank you.
So this is a discussion item, so we'll take it to the public. First, we'll start with people in the room. If anyone in the room would like to speak on this topic, the Fisherman's Lot Wetlands Project, please step forward and you'll have 3 minutes to speak. That's right. Oh, good. When the green light is on, you are live.
Good evening. Happy to be here. Thank you for having me. I'm Lawrence Tassaday. I'm the Secretary of Sustainability Advisory Board. And I was asked to actually come tonight and make a short presentation to you of our deliberations Tom was at the meeting, and he could also share his thoughts from the meeting. It was, from my viewpoint, it was an excellent meeting. Brent and Rhea were superb. The documents they sent beforehand explained the position wonderfully. And when they joined us for the meeting, they were succinct, cogent, professional, open. It was just very impressive, their presentation. As the discussion took place, it seemed to break into two parts. The first part, to me, as an environmentalist, just listening to our very capable board members, the general manager of the ski area, and this highly knowledgeable area ecologist, just the discussion for them about what you might think of as the larger watershed around Nederland. It was very informative to me. I was grateful to just be a part of that conversation. The second part of the conversation, though, tended, on the board's part, tended to shift slightly, I thought, to less of a concern or interest in the abstract, larger ecological benefits from moving the restoration to Park County, as opposed to very tangible but smaller benefits that Nederland would get, the town of Nederland. And it seemed to me that the Sustainability Advisory Board was kind of doing its proper job, which is to think about ecological and environmental aspects of proposals from a sustainability perspective as it affects the town of Nederland and its particular area. And if you apply that logic, it's kind of a binary logic in this case, it's easy to see why the board would have gravitated towards the decision that they did. The last thing I would say is that one of our board members gave a really poignant comment towards the end. She is employed by the Boulder Valley School District, and she is on their Sustainability Advisory Board. She's also the mother of a school-aged child. And she pointed out that this could become, for many school kids, the construction and then the later development of this wetlands could become a great teachable moment. Imagine bringing field trips of kids, and there's imagining also excellent illustrative signage, which I'm assuming would be there, explaining exactly what's happening and what's going to happen. Those kids would not only see almost instantly the process, but they'd also see that their society actually cares about the environment enough to go to all this trouble to restore some part of it. So we took a vote shortly after she spoke, and it was unanimous to proceed with Fisherman's lot. And I'd like to close by thanking Eldora Mountain Resort. I see them as a tremendous partner for the town of Nederland going forward in all kinds of issues. And I'll stop right there.
Thank you very much. Would anyone else in the room care to speak on the wetlands project? Again, the rule is let us know if you're a named Nederland resident and proceed.
Thank you. My name is Rich Orman. I am a recent appointee to the SAB. Thank you all for that. And I'm a resident of Nederland. And I don't really have much to add to that. I wanted to say a couple things about the project in Park County, because when you hear this, it's easy to sort of think, oh, this is just some scam or gimmick where they're writing a check and nothing's really going to happen. But looking into it, the Park County project is very worthwhile. This area is one of the few areas in the world that has this type of fen, and the restoration work there, I think, is really important. The organization, the Nature Conservancy, is obviously a really great organization for conserving land. That being said, I agree with what the board came up with as far as the recommendation to go with the Fisherman's lot because of the local implications. I think it's really important to remember it's in the same watershed. So we're taking a low intensity wetland out of the watershed. This would be adding it back into the same watershed, which I think makes a lot of sense for a lot of different reasons. That's really all I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Anyone else in the room? Again, name if you're a resident or not, and you have 3 minutes to speak.
Good evening. My name is C.T. Hutt. I am a resident of Nederland. I live up on Sundown Trail. I'd just like to thank first everyone on the board and attending for giving your time to the town and helping us with our representative democracy. It's very much appreciated. The ProSab board came to a unanimous decision about this a couple weeks ago, and I'm extremely grateful to Eldora for their openness about this whole process and being so flexible with the way that they're approaching this. Ultimately, although there may be a benefit to the wetlands banking, which I think is an excellent effort, right now, Nebraska is spending $500 million to dig a canal through Colorado on the other end of this watershed to drag water out of the state. Now, we can't do much about that here, but we can take personal responsibility for our watershed. And I think that's precisely what we should do. This is a huge opportunity for us to do an excellent piece of volunteer work. And the more those muscles are used, the stronger they become. So I am very much in forward of moving forward with the Fisherman's Lot wetlands restoration. And I thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else in the room care to speak? Not seeing anyone, we're turning to online. Does anyone online wish to speak? Raise your hand, hit *6 on your phone if you'd like to speak.
And so Jenny, if you want to go ahead, since we're in this item.
Please go ahead. Jenny, you may be muted.
Can you hear me now?
Now we can hear you. Please
Perfect.
proceed. 3 minutes. Name,
you.
if you are a resident or not, and then 3 minutes.
Jenny Cargiulo. I am a new resident. I've moved in the past year, but I've been visiting Nederland and enjoying the area for many years. And I first just wanted to start by thanking Eldora. Really appreciate the good work that you were doing. Witnessing the differently abled skiers has always been an inspiration. So thank you, Brett. Just wanted to thank you and the team for continuing to do what you can to extend those programs. And I called in to voice my support for this original vetted plan of wetland restoration to keep the wetlands within our own watershed. So I've done some research into wetland preservation and restoration, and my understanding of the benefits of keeping the wetlands local include wildfire risk mitigation in our local community. So the wetland growth between those two waterways is supposed to create fire breaks. It's also supposed to reduce flood risk in our local community. And a lot of us lived through the 2013 floods, which really impacted our downstream communities. And I think we can agree that flood mitigation is important not only to the town, but to the county. And it also is supposed to provide wildlife protection in the event of extreme weather events. So those all seem like really strong reasons to try to keep a wetland restoration in our own town, in our own community, in our own watershed. And I hear the local concerns about capacity planning for the parks team and for parking, but the upside of that capacity planning for the local project, it shores up the need for unstaffed positions in our own town, which would be local jobs going forward. And more work for those teams, which I think we need to consider and value. And I think extending our beautiful downtown trail and park system, providing that learning opportunity and seeing that happen in our community outweighs the value of those few parking spots, because that trail system and the beauty of those parks and the reservoir area is a draw of foot traffic to our local businesses. And those parking spots are actually so far away from the businesses that it's not really that much further walking distance to park at the reservoir and enjoy the journey through those trails to get to the town businesses. So that area is just a joy to all of us here. And I support the expansion maintenance of that park and trail system and those wetlands. And this is a program that enables those goals at pretty low expense to our tax base. So thank you for the opportunity to speak on this project.
Thank you, Ms. Credullo. I would like to apologize heartily. I have been following our standard procedure and not our new procedure. Therefore, I would like to ask if anyone on the board has a question for Ms. Credullo. Please proceed, Trustee Blakemore.
I didn't quite understand what you were saying about capacity, and then you talked about the teens as well. Could you go over that part of your response again?
So the fact that we can't support this project with town employees and trucks this year for the park team, I actually don't see that as a bad thing, because it means that we're already actively planning that team's capacity for next year, which provides support for positions which are currently unstaffed, which would be local jobs and would be assurance of the continuation of those roles.
I understand now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? If not, I would like to open it up for our prior speakers. We were listening very carefully as you spoke.
Yes, please.
If anyone has a question for one of our prior speakers who are in the room.
Jesse, I think we're just going to take public. I think Mayor Taylor wants to just know if anyone has any questions from the board for people in the room, and then we'll get to you for your comment.
Absolutely. Anyone? Very fine then. We'll proceed.
Jesse, I'm sorry.
Hey there. Hi, I am Jessica Ansari, a town resident and chair of the Parks, Recreation and Open Space Advisory Board. Yeah, I'd just like to echo some of the thanks. Brent and Raya were fantastic to talk to. They answered many, many questions from our board. We kind of grilled them. We think the Ignite program is super fantastic and it has all of our full support. And on the ProSAB's end, we held a special session to discuss this, and then we spent about a month conducting community outreach. And then at our following meeting, we debated even more pros and cons. And that was how we came to our unanimous decision to recommend that we continue on with the local wetland restoration project as it's designed. One of the potential pros to wetland banking that we discussed would be keeping a parking lot down there. And we did talk about this quite a bit, and from our research and feedback, we realized that the parking argument doesn't really hold much weight. The lot sits virtually empty all of the time. It provides very few spaces, and the current restoration project does include provisions for maintaining several parking spaces in that area. So the total loss of parking is negligible, insignificant. It actually only removes barely any parking spaces. And another primary benefit to going with the banking system that we discussed was that it would be much simpler for Raya and for town to go ahead and create a local wetland habitat. It would be more straightforward to fund the preservation of this amazing wetland area near Fairplay. And our board also discussed recreational potentials of the lot in question. So we debated the pros and cons of a bike park in the area. The bike park subcommittee, which includes the excavation company, which is offering to donate some services, totally different topic. They met for a walkabout last month and they analysed multiple lots around town, and they concluded that there are just a number of areas around town that would be far better, far more suitable for bike park for multiple reasons. We also talked about maintenance. Local wetlands would be exceedingly low maintenance. We talked about public safety. We learned about watersheds and wetlands. Basically, from the park's perspective, the current project, it wouldn't just be a benefit to Netherlands riparian habitat. It would definitely improve the overall Netherland area trails and park system. And it could also be a hugely positive advertising for the Ignite program. So we just kind of thought that Eldora has this amazing opportunity to demonstrate their commitment to local open space improvements. And the ProSAB actually suggested that the wetlands area even be named after the Ignite program and that signage be created to publicize their achievements. So yeah, I think we were just all in agreement that if it goes ahead as it currently stands, the town could benefit from an $80,000 to $100,000 environmental investment into our local public park system. What a fantastic opportunity that could be. It doesn't come around very often. So we would just, as a board, we would like to definitely continue collaborating with the Sustainability Advisory Board on making the needed improvements. the project as it stands, it really complements the current parks improvements that we're working on across the way at Backer Meadows and Gershio. So yeah, after much discussion, we decided to formally vote and recommend to the BOT that we continue with the current resolution as it stands. And we would definitely be happy to share any more detailed information about many of the conversations that we had that led to this recommendation. So thank you very much to Rhea and Brent and to Eldora and to all the board's feedback that we got.
Ms. Ansari, thank you very much. Does anyone on the board have questions for Ms. Ansari? Very fine then. Anyone else online wish to speak?
And *6 if you're on the phone.
*6 if you're on the phone. Not seeing anyone, we bring it back to the board. I believe the board has a couple of comments that they would like to make. Primarily, I would like us to keep in mind as we speak that one of the things we would like to do is give Eldora a sense of what we think is the right thing to do. And so I think I will be asking for a nod of 4, just to make sure that we're all in agreement and Eldora is aware of what they need to do. So I'll begin with Trustee Corvallin. Trustee Corvallin, any comments and what your thoughts on what direction we should take?
Hold on, we won't be able to hear her yet. Okay, go ahead.
Oh, hi. Well, I mean, I've always been a huge advocate for existing wetlands. That's always been my big issue with the Big Springs Egress Road, that most of the plans had required putting a road right through the middle of an egress. And also when Boulder Community Housing decided to put the apartment on an existing wetland that we already had. And so I'm not, certainly this will be a nice thing to have, or in a nice environment to have for the town of Nederland. I just am a little concerned about us essentially eliminating a pretty valuable lot when town really doesn't have that many town-owned lots. And so that's my biggest concern, that once it's a wetland, I mean, obviously we could fill it back in, and we've done it before for other projects, but I just feel like we don't really know what town's going to be looking like in 5 years, what the waterfront's going to be looking at like. The next thing on the agenda is to talk about other park projects we'd like to see done, and all that's nice, but we are limited by scope of, land that we own. A lot of the waterfront land is currently our water and sewage plant. A lot of it is owned by town of Boulder. Once we've given this up, I wonder if we might regret it 10 years from now. I love wetlands. I think it's going to be a project. I hope that town has the ability to follow through. I think there are going to be other responsibilities that Parks and Roads is going to be dealing with, especially with the egress road project that's coming up on the agenda, where they're going to be asked to be maintaining this couple-mile long road as a forever thing, because you can't build an egress without maintenance. So as much as I love the idea of a wetland, I just am a little leery about giving up land that could be used for, housing, for workforce housing, could be used for, I mean, there aren't that many parking spots now, but that's because it hasn't been used. I don't know. If you guys all want a wetland, certainly I think it's great. I just feel like we don't have that much land in town. And giving it up is a big deal. So just remember that.
Trustee Corvallin, would you like to wait until we have gone through the rest of the trustees and then come back to you to see if you're prepared to be part of the nod of 4?
Sure.
Okay. Then Trustee Coombs Esmail.
Jess Ansari really hit all of my points that I have in my notes. So I'm a bit redundant, it seems, in this conversation. I mean, that's precisely the way that ProSab went about coming to their unanimous recommendation to go forward with the Fisherman's Lot project. Similarly to the SAB, we felt like building a wetlands in our watershed, in our town, getting investment from a private entity that is outside of our town of this scale would be something would be nigh on impossible to achieve in any other circumstance, and that it's just such a fabulous opportunity that we really shouldn't pass it up. We did consider, from a parks perspective, other uses of the land and determined that this would still be by far the best use, even with the kind of ongoing discussions about other parks and rec projects that we have on the docket. From ProSab perspective, what else did we discuss? I should point out that we did consult with town staff and with the PD about the usage of the lot as a parking lot, and it was reported to us that usage is very, very low. And because this plan, this very lovely design that will have interpretive signage and trails and potential educational opportunities, will also have parking, including accessible parking as part of the plan. So that to us kind of mitigated the parking concern just about entirely. And then the last thing that I would say is that there is a concern about usage and how usage of public lands is going to be enforced. And one of the conversations that we had was that when final designs are put before us, that we are very careful to consider designs that allow for the enforcement, I don't know a better way to say it, of parks regulation ordinances that we may very well pass and which is on the agenda tonight. So there's a real synergy there between this project and the parks regulations ordinance that we have on as a discussion item tonight. So there was also so much public outreach done, not just by ProSab in the last month, but also previously when this project was put before the town. And I think that because it was such a heavily publicly vetted project, that to pivot now to improve an area that is not in our watershed, albeit a very valuable project for our state, would be a mistake. And that's the conclusion that ProSab came to.
So I take it you are a nod in favor of the Fisherman's Lot wetland.
Indeed, I am.
Very fine. Trustee Blakemore.
So my understanding is that we're actually doing a restoration project. So we're returning this lot to what it was before it was turned into a parking lot. I also understand that the wetlands will not cover all the parking spaces in that location. I agree with what others have said about how that lot is not heavily used. I walk through it quite a lot, at least once a week. And it is so far from the businesses that the customers and employees don't use it, as far as I can tell. And we are looking at other options for parking in town. One that we're considering is a parking garage at the RTD park and ride site, which will require a lot of more investigation and more agreement from RTD to do that. So I believe that this wetlands is consistent with the 2013 Parks, Recreation, Open Space Master Plan, which shows conversion of the parking lot to a more natural setting. In particular, there's one large area that it calls an educational bioswale with added creek access. So I feel that this project is consistent with what we have been planning to do for that area. We've already invested time, research, and energy and money into this project. The town has spent close to $4,000 on the design that JVA has done. Let's see what else. if we do decide to go with this project, which I'm in favor of doing, I, I, I'd like to see us consider filling out the sustainability scorecard on this project and every project that we undertake. Rather than putting all of that responsibility on the Sustainability Advisory Board, I think it should be on the project owner with consultation with Sustainability Advisory Board. I've talked to them recently about filling out scorecards, and they said they used to spend like all their time doing that. So I think it would be more appropriate for the project owner to do that, because then they can look at different ways that they can improve sustainability of the project. And we're talking not just about environmental sustainability, but also about social and economic. So sorry to go off on that tangent, but I thought I'd give all the information I have on the scorecard at this time.
So I take it you would be a second nod. Very fine.
Mayor Taylor, just super fast. Eldora is looking for a vote so that there's like a written record of the
So it should be-
decision. So we will want to move this to an action and then do the vote. So they have it in the minutes, the final decision.
Would the decision be to do that today?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's a simple enough motion.
Yeah.
So
And I realize Mayor Pro Tem Maholden hasn't gone yet.
very fine. Yeah.
Just
So,
wanted you to know the direction we're heading.
and who interrupted? Who interrupted? Okay,
Me,
thank you
I
both.
did it.
Mayor Pro Tem Maholden.
Okay, so looking at the packet, it looks like their question before the board is, does the BOD want to continue with Fisherman's Lot Wetlands project or direct EMR to utilize the Wetland Bank instead? And so I think that's where we're headed. This is a discussion item, but if we're ready to vote tonight, I guess we can make a motion to proceed. I think just informally going around the table, I can see where this is going to go. I know how I feel about it. Should I make a motion now?
Well, let me.
Good.
What she's heard discussed. I think this was kind of a tough question for me. It's clear, partly because from what I read, I wasn't getting the full story of all. There was plenty. I was kind of on the fence. Wetlands from this watershed, or to restore wetlands to this watershed, that seems to be very much symmetry. But I just realized I don't have my microphone on. Terribly sorry. I would say I would be one of the nods because I like the idea of taking, of restoring wetlands to this watershed. Trustee Corvallin, do you have any thoughts before we convert this to an action item?
No, you already heard my thoughts. I mean, since everyone else is voting in favor, I will probably as well, because in theory, I like the idea of wetlands. I don't think it's a prudent thing to do at this time, though, for town planning purposes, but I'm all for wetlands, and I hope you guys remember this in the future when you talk about filling in wetlands for buildings and when you talk about building roads across wetlands, and remember how much you love them right now when in the future, when it comes up where we're destroying them, because it happens a lot that I'm fighting for them. And so that's why I will vote yes, simply because everybody else is. And I do like wetlands. I'm just don't think it's the greatest spot for it, but.
Trustee Corvallin, I would note that the people in the room were laughing when you were saying that, and they were not laughing at you, they were laughing with you, that what you were stating was a very right on point, and everyone took that very seriously.
I didn't hear the laughing, and it's not funny because I'm pretty upset about some past decisions, but that's
No,
great.
I'm just telling you that it was not, it was good humored approval of what you said. Is there a motion to convert this to an action item?
Sorry, could I ask just a quick procedural question?
Please do.
There's no resolution.
There is not, but I think so. You would be moving this to action item, then your motion would be to continue forward with resolution 2019
Okay.
-12
Okay.
as written.
Great, thank you.
That was my concern. If this were a really complicated thing, then yes, you're right, we would need something written. But I believe it's simple enough that we can do this properly. Do we have a motion?
We do. I move that the Board of Trustees continue with the Fisherman's.
Hold on, we have to convert this to an action item.
Yes, thank you. I move that we move this from a discussion item to an action item.
We have a second. We have a motion and a second. Macy, please take the vote.
Trustee Blakemore? Yes.
It was you.
Trustee Coombs Ismail?
Yes.
Mayor Taylor?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Mahold?
Yes.
And Trustee Corvalon?
Yes.
Trustee Corvalon, hold on one moment. So Macy, if you also press that white button, it'll take you right to the screen, just so you know. Trustee Corvalon, are you there?
What's that?
We're calling for your vote now. We just lost audio.
Oh, I
so-
already said yes.
Yeah, we had lost audio. We couldn't hear you, so.
Technology is a fickle partner. So do we have a motion regarding Fisherman's Lot action item? You can make the motion, Tom, if you'd like. Okay.
I make motion to continue Resolution 2019-12, approval of conservation declaration.
I think that's appropriate because that's what you're doing.
Okay.
And I second.
We have a motion and a second. Macy, please take the vote.
Trustee Coombs Ismail?
Yes.
Trustee Blakemore?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Mahold?
Yes.
Trustee Corvalon?
Yes.
And Mayor Taylor?
Yes.
Thank you.
Very fine. So we're done with that. I would like to propose a 5-minute break. So we will come back at 9:17 and resume with the Big Springs egress.
This is Rhea. Thank you, everyone, for all of your support and thought into this, to you, the Board of Trustees, as well as the public. Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Brett.
And I agree from an Ignite and Eldora standpoint. We're excited to do the project in partnership with you guys. It makes a lot of sense. And I think we've heard everybody loud and clear. We just wanted to make sure this is still the will of the people, so to speak, 3 years later. So appreciate it.
Thanks, Brett.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brent.
Okay. Thanks, you guys.
Okay, so next time just press
Yeah,
that.
press the white button and it takes you straight to that. We can do that again, though.
Okay, now we're unmuted. In about a minute, we're going to be restarting. Everyone start thinking about creating a space for the possibility of resuming the meeting. Resume your seats and prepare for action. All right, we're about to resume. Everyone take your seats. Everyone take your seats as we resume the meeting. And pursue our big idea. So we're resuming the meeting. This is also a discussion item. It regards the Big Springs egress, and Miranda is introducing it.
Yeah, so I'm going to take us back a little bit, give some history here. So in 2019, the Boulder County Commissioners gave conditional approval for the town of Nederland to construct an emergency egress in Big Springs subdivision. As you all know, Big Springs is really kind of a one-way in, one-way out. So for emergency sake, this became a priority for town and the county commissioners. There were a variety of different routes that were discussed. You see some of those in the packet. There's multicolored lines. So we explored a lot of different options. Ultimately, the commissioners really wanted to make sure we were assessing a route that had the least impact on the environment. So a committee was formed. Really included Richter, Chris Pelletier, Karen Garrity kind of to start, and then added in myself, Trustee Corvalin, Jesse Ansari, Trustee Blakemore is a new addition, Rick Henriksen, and Mike Scott. We looked at a lot of different routes. We had JVA do an assessment, and ultimately we landed on what I'm calling the Ridgeline route for now, so as to avoid any confusion. So what this is we're looking to come, as you'll see here, kind of through Doe Trail, but we want to be able to access the Ridgeline here through a driveway. This driveway serves 4 properties. So what we'd be looking at is basically an emergency easement here, emergency access easement to be able to use this driveway. There is a feeling, and I think the fire department's still on, that this is ultimately the best route for them and what their needs are. But the complexity is just that. It is a driveway. So while Richter started some conversations with these owners, it's been probably a couple of years, a year or two, since we really, or maybe about a year, since we really met with them and talked to them about what their expectations would be for us accessing this emergency route through their driveway. So what we're looking for tonight is just kind of a talk with you of, do you think this is a great route? Do you want staff to pursue those conversations? Want to talk about a larger challenge is finances. So we were awarded funding through this community project funding where Congressman Nagu selected Big Springs egress to be a priority. They were only going to fund 75% of the project, so approximately $525,000. I received a phone call last week, though, that was not guaranteed funds. Unlike what we thought it was, we have to apply. There is no guarantee, and the person I was speaking with said that it was potentially unlikely that we get these funds because they're not used for egress. He has struggled to see egress as being funded because there is a variety of other FEMA funding for this type of purpose. So the other kind of challenge is we have to apply for these funds and we have to come up with a 25% match, and we have to come up with it within the next 30 days. I'm not sure how to do that. Town doesn't necessarily have those resources, but we're happy to bring forward a supplemental budget. But again, those are some of the things that recently came forward about this funding that we didn't know about. Either way, we knew that we were going to have to go forward for that additional about $200,000. Our plan was to go for a FEMA grant. You can't match federal with federal. So even if we got the 200 or the 525,000 and we figured out what our match was, to get us maybe even the rest of the way, we'd have to look for alternative funding. So funding is going to be a big problem here. So really there's two questions before you. Question one is, do you like this ridgeline route? And question two is, how do you direct staff on this funding and specifically assessing the match? If you have any recommendations of how you'd like to see us proceed. I think I've covered it all, but I do think if Mike or Chief Scott or Fire Marshal Henriksen, if he's still around, want to chime in and make sure I haven't missed anything from a fire department standpoint, I would love to invite them.
No, Miranda, this is Chief Scott. You did a great job of explaining that, being new to the area and new to the organization, I did ask Rick to come on the meeting and address any concerns or any comments anyone had. But I believe moving forward, that is the best route for emergency egress.
Thank you very much, Chief Scott. Let's bring it to the board. This is a discussion item, but I think we will want some kind of a conclusion near the end, perhaps a not a 4, something like that. I don't believe it needs to be an action item because we're basically directing staff. Let's go around and so I'd like to ask the trustees to speak first, and I'd like each of the trustees to bear in mind that there are kind of two questions to be considered here. One is, does this look like the right route to you? And the other is, how are you thinking of approaching the financial issue, which seems to be rather slippery?
Yeah, I think one of the big things is given the tight time frame, I just would like confirmation that there is a desire of the Board of Trustees to apply for this 525 and to, as town staff, start to
Also look for the
assess.
Yeah.
That is a number that will compromise your ability to likely do the comprehensive plan this year. I do want to clarify, it's basically the same amount of money. It's a bit of a give and take here.
So thank you very much for that added dimension to this. So those are the things to consider. And I'd like to begin with Trustee Corvalin.
Well, regarding the funding, what about Boulder County? They are pretty flush right now. They got a bit of money for the Gross Reservoir expansion. I feel like this could be tied in somehow to that money. Is there any possibility of asking them for it?
I'm happy to ask them. I think one of the recent conversations I had was that it was kind of this like, you're funding this yourself type mentality. And I couldn't tell you why. That was just kind of conversations with not probably the right people. We need to take it to a higher level.
Gross Reservoir money is meant to go to communities that are going to be impacted by the logging operations there. And I certainly think we could make an argument about how we're going to be impacted with traffic and people recreating here more because they can't there. I don't know. I feel like there could be arguments made.
Yeah.
Getting that money.
And our Jennifer Waltz, our grant writer, is very much in this. And so we're happy to explore all sorts of options. So we're definitely.
But as far as the actual route, I mean, like, that's been the biggest problem with this project is the route, because the best route is the ridge, without a doubt. But how do you get to the ridge? Richter had drawn a really, really steep switchback up the side of the ridge that cut across the wetland and switched back, and it was really steep for most people driving. And so that is why the driveway option is the only logical way to get to the ridge. But I know the neighbors on that driveway, and specifically the ones where the road will go in between their two properties, have not been supportive of it at all. I mean, I've had one-on-ones with them, trying my best from an ecological point of view to, convince them. And so I'm wondering, have you talked to them recently? Do they know we're having this conversation right now?
No, so we have not. I think we were looking at ultimately the feeling with our attorney was that we really needed clear instruction from the Board of Trustees before we began any sort of conversation or negotiation. Doing so would have been premature if ultimately the desire of the board was to not do this route or to put this on hold anyway. So we wanted to make sure we had that direction from you.
I think financially, this is also the cheapest route to do because of and I think if you talk to the Forest Service, I don't know if any communication with them. I know they kind of got sidelined with the Cameron fire and stuff, but one of the main projects they were going to do was clean up the ridge and build logging roads through there. And so I feel like if you guys communicated with those people, and it's not Angela anymore, I don't know the new person's name, but Kevin's still working there, I think. Perhaps it won't, and if you can get access to the driveway, and if Forest Service does the majority of the work on the actual ridge, it will just be a very short tie-in. For time, I think it could be done cheaper if you get access to the driveway and if Forest Service begins the work for you. So I don't know if that conversation has happened at all with Forest Service. It's part of the Forest Side project, and it's in the Unit 3 section, and it's on the list for them to do the ridge. So have you talked to them about when they might be doing that?
No, so we really haven't gotten into any of the specifics here. This, as you know, the subcommittee recently just formed about 4 months ago to kind of pick up where there was a little bit of lag in Rick Durr leaving. And so we have not really had any of those in-depth conversations. Again, we'll definitely do so if that's the direction of the board on how you'd like staff to proceed.
Well, I would say to pursue the driveway, but to expect them to not be supportive of it. So then, I don't know what the other plan would be because I would not be in support of the original route, and neither was the fire department or any of the people who have looked at it that are related to fire departments. I forgot the name of that group that we invited to do a wildlife plan. And so that is the only thing. I mean, if you can't get buy-in from those homeowners there, it's going to be pretty difficult to make a road. So I would give a nod to pursue communicating and seeing the options for using the driveway, but not to pursue any of the other routes.
So the intention was to have a conversation with the neighbors to figure out like what it is, like, are you looking for, plowing, whatever it might be, like how can we kind of sweeten this deal a bit? This is not popular, of course, but ultimately the board could decide eminent domain and condemnation if health and safety was the ultimate priority. That is never where a board should go. There should be every avenue pursued, but that is something the board will have to assess should you run into those roadblocks but not want to consider alternative routes.
And the other comment I have is the idea of having, once this road is built, there has to be money in the budget for maintaining this road. It can't be expected to be done by Boulder County or the Forest Service. And so that to me is really important because, I know currently right now, just in the trails, there's like 4 or 5 new down trees. And I know that we never expect to have to egress in the winter time, but lately that's not out of the question anymore. Which is another reason why the ridge is actually a good route because it doesn't hold snow as much as the lower route, the original route that's in the plan holds snow. Still has, well, it just recently melted out, but normally you would have to be considering plowing that on the year round to make sure it's egress full. So that's just something that in the future, when you get funding, you have to make sure that town can actually manage to maintain this road so that the idea is any vehicle can get out. You would hate for a car to, have an obstacle and not be able to evacuate. So those are just my thoughts.
Thank you, Trustee Corvallin. Mayor Pro Tem Mahold.
Well, I had the privilege of riding the bus together with Trustee Blakemore on Sunday, and I had this map, and so I got off the bus and I went up the hill and I walked routes A, B, and part of C. And the B is the one that we're on the map that we're looking at, that we're calling the Ridgeline route. And I really appreciate Trustee Blakemore's finding that we were using the wrong plan, because that saved us $80,000. Okay, so we've got several issues in front of us. Number one, that driveway, I'm a little concerned that we don't have a better bead on the will of the neighbors to work with us. I think we absolutely need to do this, but what's in front of us tonight is, do we want town to proceed with looking at this? I'm telling you right now, after what Marshall Johns told us the other night, I went home and had a nightmare that involved people burning in their homes. To me, this is a high priority, get this done, even if we have to spend a lot. We've done some crazy things over the last 2 years, but next 30 days, if we're serious about this, we're gonna have to kick it in gear pretty quick. So I've walked the route. It's not as long as I looked at this thing. I thought, oh, this is going to take, this is a long way, because there's no scale on the map. But when you walk it, it takes 10 minutes. So I'm inclined to treat this as a very high priority item, to look at some of the things we've thrown out there and proof them, to see if we've got what it takes. But if we've got $525,000 that's about to go away, we're not going to get another opportunity like this. I want to, for the next 30 days, I'll drop a lot of things to get this done. That's my feeling.
Thanks, you, Mayor Pro Tem Mahold. Trustee Coombs Esmail.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. This is a high priority. I mean, we've seen what's been going on, and we're surrounded by a lot of unmitigated forests. I live in the Big Springs neighborhood myself. I've walked all of these routes many times. I regularly run the original Doe Trail route, and it's an obvious wetland. I mean, it gets wet, which also makes it a natural fire break. It's also down in a ditch, which is not a great place to be stuck if you're trying to flee fast-moving wildfire. So for pretty much every reason, ecological to what the purpose of this is, which is fire safety and egress, Route B is very clearly the best option, and really should be, I think, the only one pursued at this time. I do want to also point out, technically, we don't need the folks' permission to build a road. We can build a road on land that is owned by town and the county and Forest Service. That's not really an issue. What's issue is that easement for emergency access to that road through the driveway. And so that, I think, is something that we can work on in the long term and find as many ways as possible to make that what's the right word, a congenial a way of getting that emergency access through an easement. But the road we can build, and we can get the funding for it, and we can build the road, and that can be done regardless of whether.
So there's a slight not hiccup. Yes, we can build the road, but the road, in order to connect to the driveway, has to go through private property. A sliver.
Yeah.
But still does. I think that's one of the maybe misconceptions of that 525,000 is we really thought like, oh great, we can like hit the ground running and at least start getting moving. I was told not to spend a dime because there's no guarantee.
Yeah.
And there could be a series, so it's nice to hear Mayor Pro Tem Mahold say that, because there could be a series of studies we have to pay for quickly. I have a call with them next week to get an understanding of how fast we're moving. But we'll have to pull a lot of things together in a very short amount of time in order to be eligible to apply.
Well, while this board is new, and even members of staff in their current positions are newer, I mean, this is a conversation that has been going on in this town for multiple decades. So, it is becoming more and more urgent the more years that pass. It's just something that I think we need to address, and it would be a major accomplishment. And if it were the only accomplishment of this board, this board would have done a great job if we could manage to get this done, honestly, because it has been so long-standing and it is such a massive project in scale. So Route B, it's the one for me. It's the only route. It makes sense from a fire safety perspective, from a firefighting perspective, and to boot an ecological perspective. So how could we turn that one down? I do think we should start negotiating with the neighbors as soon as possible, find as many incentives as we possibly can, and really try to nail down what the concerns are so that we can address them directly rather than just general feeling. Like if we can nail down like some specific concerns, maybe there are ways that we can address it. In terms of the funding, Boulder County has to be asked multiple times, and I would say that I will probably bring it in front of the Boulder County Commission of Cities, Consortium of Cities, because representatives from every town government are there, which helps, I think, from a political perspective. And I do think that we have to make this a political issue, not just a staff to staff issue, not just our staff to Boulder County staff, but our elected and appointed officials to their elected and appointed officials, because this is a crucial project. Their congressperson is our congressperson, has obviously made this a priority, has at least gotten us access to the application for these funds. So I do think that some partnership there, especially considering their deeper coffers these days, it really should be demanded of the county that they help us with this.
I think to your point, it does need to be at that elected official level. And Trustee Blakemore and I have been going to a couple transportation, and I do think that's another avenue. As staff, we're not going to get far. So we really do need kind of all hands on deck when it comes to the Board of Trustees helping to get us moving in the right direction.
Yeah, I think it is important for us to just always recognize that other governments, their staff are acting at the direction of their various boards and councils, and just like ours are. And so if we have relationships that are good with those boards and councils, we might be able to get their staff to work with ours in a more fluent way.
Thank you, Trustee Coombs-Esmail. Trustee Blakemore.
The Ridge Route B, is it? Yeah, Route B is the one we should go with because it's been vetted. We've had lots of people look at it. We've had the fire department, we've had ProSab, we've had DOT members. So it's definitely the preferable route for a number of reasons. I think I think we should continue to pursue the grant that we received or that we have to apply for with FEMA, the $525,000. And at the same time, investigate matching grants. Boulder County was mentioned, I think state, and I know you have someone looking at grants, so continue to look at that. If we can't receive the grant that we got from Congress, then it sounds like FEMA has other grants for egress.
Yes.
So that's a fallback. And concurrently, meet with the neighbors to come up with conditions that are agreeable by both the neighbors and the town. And if I was a neighbor there, I mean, one benefit of being there is that you're right there on the egress. Okay, so you can get out the quickest. You're the first ones out. Perhaps another benefit is that the town would plow and maintain that road. I understand that we'll have to widen it for the firefighting equipment. So that needs to, we need to make it clear with the folks who own the shared driveway and the folks who have the private property that we cross, what the expectations are. as far as what's going to change on their road, and then come up with some conditions. I think, and they should look at it too as something that's beneficial to the community, to their neighbors, right? Their neighbors who live on the east side of Big Springs trying to get out in case of a fire. So there's a lot of reasons that, I think we can come up with some terms that would be agreeable to them and to the town. Let's see, what else did I want to say? Yeah, I don't know. Can we get any leeway on the deadline for the matching funds? Since we didn't know that federal grants couldn't be used, or is that something we should have known already?
Yeah, no, I asked that question. I was like, well, wait a minute. It was interesting because actually even FEMA didn't realize how this got communicated to us. So that somehow there, unfortunately, is a bit of a gap between these community projects and how it then moves after that, because it just got dropped on their staff's lap. And so we're all trying to sort it out together, which is great. But no, unfortunately, the deadline was hard. And right now, the deadline was mid-June. So, and I haven't even released the application to me. Basically, they were told by the time I get the application, it'll be about 30 days. It's tight. And I think a lot of that was community projects are meant to be shovel ready. I think we are very fortunate that we were able to get awarded or selected, and that we of course have the designs of sorts, but we're not as shovel ready as I think maybe some other projects are. And so now there's a lot of pressure. And I think if there's a commitment by the board, that commitment has to be in the sense of, kind of all hands on deck and how we move forward. And then also prioritizing financially that this might have to come before other large scale financial projects we're looking at.
I would be in favor of postponing the comprehensive plan in order to get this done. We don't, if we have this pot of money that's available to us, we think
right.
It should be available to us. I think we need to take advantage of that and not lose that opportunity. So comprehensive plans, we can still be working on it.
Mm-hmm.
We're updating the Parks, Recreation, Open Space Trails Plan. We're doing a housing needs assessment. I want to do a transportation master plan through grant funding. And those are all components of the comprehensive plan. So I don't feel too bad about delaying that. Yeah.
Yeah, and we're going to bring back a supplemental budget to you. And also recognizing that there are urgent, like here and now needs, like vehicles. Like there's a lot we really have to assess here in terms of where are we going? And so we'll just Rita and I will come to with our recommendations, knowing what the priorities are, and we'll do the best we can.
Yeah, I would be if we can't get a grant for the matching fund, I would be in favor of us using our own money for it. I think it's that important, and we're getting a large amount of the cost.
Yeah.
But so.
And one opportunity, because it is so tight, is that town could agree to do the funds, and then maybe Boulder County reimburses us or whatever that might be. But I need to come to the table saying the Board of Trustees committed to $175,000. I can't still be, but this might work out. We would then have to work out whatever that agreement was with those other entities to then kind of reimburse town.
I agree, Trustee Blakemore, but I also think we should not tell Boulder County that just yet.
Agreed.
I didn't say that.
Thank you, Trustee Blakemore.
Miranda, so this is Tanya. Nagusi's money is not a done deal. That's what you're saying.
Correct.
You're
Yeah.
reapplying for it. Is that because so much time has passed, or because it was mistakenly given to us and this project really isn't in the scope of that money?
No, so that's tricky. So all community projects have to apply for the funds. All that basically happened is what Trustee Coombs Ismail said is we were selected and given the opportunity to apply, because not every project will apply for these funds. But
okay,
now that opened up that door, but we now have the next door to get through, which is that to actually get the money, and that's not the guarantee.
That wasn't communicated that well, I don't think, huh?
No, not at all. And again, even this FEMA
we have
representative
been
was like,
selected to apply.
right.
All right.
Yeah, I felt for him. What he was doing was calling all the community selected projects and breaking the bad news to every single one of us. So I felt for him. He said it wasn't really well communicated to his team either, how this was all working. So I think there is some work on their end to tighten that up. But now we know.
Yeah. I mean, we are rather shovel ready though. Hasn't JVA already done all the, for the actual ridge part?
They haven't, to my understanding, they haven't done the full engineering. What they did is provide kind of a preliminary design because again, up until even a couple months ago, we were still weighing different routes. And so now they're going to really need to do the engineering of the Route B itself, including kind of the widening of the road and all the other aspects that go into that. And so we basically got the cost, the probable cost and a preliminary site plan. We didn't have the funds, I guess to clarify, we didn't have the funds to do a full-fledged engineering plan. And so everything just
These funds to do the engineering plan.
Yeah.
I mean, that's an absurd requirement if we have to have it engineered already.
Right.
That couldn't possibly be the case for small towns like us.
Right. That's always a challenge.
So this is a discussion item. I'm taking it to the public for discussion. So is anyone in the room interested in commenting on this topic, the Big Springs egress? Name, if you're a resident or not, and 3 minutes. Oh, it's the other microphone.
The green button's on. Kayla Evans, 1250 Eldora Road. I would actually, I apologize for coming a little bit late to this process, even though I've known about it for years. Can I ask you a question, the board a question, so then I can qualify with my question? Okay.
I'll let you.
When you're talking about Big Springs, right, the town and the reservoir, right? Oh, here. Are you dividing it up this way or are you dividing it up this way? To the people that are on the bottom would go out Big Springs, the people on the top would go out Peak View?
I would imagine that's a question for the fire department or the police department to answer. And so you couldn't see her, Mike or Rick, but Kayla's basically asking, based on where you live within Big Springs, like what section of Big Springs would be directed to take Route B here and what would maybe be directed to come out onto the highway? Do you?
And my other
can
question
either of you
is,
comment?
have you guys talked to the Forest Service? Have they looked at Big Springs and said, when a fire happens, this is how it will travel? This is the, okay, all right, you did that.
Yes.
Yeah, Rick or Mike, could you comment on typically how you would direct a neighborhood like Big Springs to exit?
This is Rick. It's going to depend on where the fire is and where it's coming from. Most of the time, fires with our prevailing winds are going to come from the west. So Peak View is not going to be an option most of the time. So either Big Springs or this egress route are going to be the options. And we're just going to have to figure that out at the time and which is the best one. It's probably somewhat of a split, but I can't say at this point whether there'll be definite breaks at addresses or different roads. We'll have to do a little bit of work on that, but also then look at the situation at the time.
Thanks, Rick. To that, the comment about that is then I think two things that need to happen in this process when you get a little further is to make sure that the people that live up there know what route they are supposed to go and that they try driving it once before they actually have to do this emergency. So they know to turn here and they know to turn here. And then the other problem is, okay, we've gotten them down out of Big Springs. We have one bridge. So you're going to create your loggerhead in town then, because everybody in town is going to be trying to go that way too. These are things that people of Nederland have been talking about for 20 years, and now it's on your shoulders, and God love you. I just think it's for all of you to know, I just got a $75,000 grant to do some mitigating with the Forest Service out on the ranch, and I'm really happy about that. So I'm going to try and keep the fire from coming my direction and then going into town. But those are my questions, and I thank you I apologize for my ignorance, and thank you for your due diligence. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Kayla.
This is Tanya. I would think if you're evacuating onto Magnolia Road, you would probably either continue to the east or cross over to Cold Creek Canyon versus head into the cluster that will be the town of Nederland. And I 100% agree about a second bridge. I feel like that really should be more of a priority than this, but I think they're both important projects. That's all I have to say. I know the forest is doing a lot of mitigating. And I also, it's a separate comment, and I think I'll save it for the end. So about open space, but.
So Mike Scott has his hand raised, and I know Jesse, you do too, but I don't know if Mike wants to comment on this discussion. So Mike, do you?
Mr. Scott, are you wanting to speak?
Yes, just to reiterate what Rick was saying, depending the location of the fire itself would be the route folks would take. But I do want to let everyone know there will be an education and training component as well as a signage on those egress. So once that is in place, we would have to, go with that education campaign to the town and to those residents on in the event of an emergency, as well as a notification process in the event that egress is being used, and how those folks in that area are notified in the event of an emergency. Thank you for your time. Sorry to address that.
Oh, no, Chief Scott, I apologize for not connecting the name to the position. Thank you very much.
Jesse Ansari.
Ms. Ansari, please proceed.
Hi, yeah, Jesse Ansari, a town resident, a resident of Big Springs, actually, and chair of ProSab. And I'm kind of glad we're starting here with this discussion. I can absolutely share what I know about some of the history of this project too. I attended the last public hearing with Boulder County commissioners about the egress in 2019, early 2019, and listened to their concerns and how the county commissioners requested an evaluation of a number of preferred alternatives to address the original route that was proposed. So since then, I've read a lot of the related materials and documents, the CPAR analysis, the time until fire arrival analysis from various locations around Big Springs, spatial analyses and things. And it concern to me was the safety analysis of that route. In particular, the Colorado Parks and Wildlife analysis noted the extreme steep topography along that first proposed route that could potentially lead to a fire tunnel effect in the event of a wildfire, which, as a resident, that's pretty terrifying. So really quickly, over the last couple of years, a committee has been meeting. We've met with members from the fire department, the previous fire chief, ProSab members, Board of Trustees members, the previous mayor, residents of the neighborhood, and then also members of Magnolia Multi-Party Monitoring Group. We've had on-site visitors with committee members and residents of the fire department and Congressman Magoo's. And yeah, everyone agreed that the most ideal route, Route B, is the one that traverses the ridgeline just slightly east the old route proposal. And it's ideal. I think it's ideal for a number of reasons, really, because the grade is less steep. The initial build and long-term maintenance is definitely going to be way less expensive, less complicated, and it's in an area that's already slated for forest and tree mitigation through the Forsyth 2 project. It has a much lower environmental impact from the lower one, and it would be safer and quicker. But yet the kind of thing that we've been discussing is the initial access to the ridgeline. That has a complication, and we definitely would like to keep on working with the town and with the BOT about how to move forward in these regards, because we're really ready to move on kind of media and ready to start soliciting robust public feedback. I think basically this really could inconvenience a handful of homeowners near where the access road meets the neighborhood roads. But there's also, we've been talking about a lot of potential benefits to the adjacent driveway owners. There's things like town provided ploughing, driveway maintenance, maybe tax benefits, neighborhood kudos. There's lots of other things we've been talking about. And about safety things, and about there'd be breakaway bollards, signs. So they've got access concerns about people coming close to them. Unfortunately, it's a priority decision. I wish it wasn't. I wish we didn't need to make this decision as quickly as we do. I do think a neighborhood egress is just super important. And the subcommittee is basically waiting on town legal advice.
Ms. Ansari, that's your 3 minutes.
Great. What kind of incentives we can offer to the nearby homeowners? So we haven't publicised any of this or started requesting feedback. So we look forward to working with Mike Scott in the near future. And
thank you. Does anyone else online have any comments regarding the Big Springs egress?
We're at *6. We have some new call-in users. So *6.
Could we take a quick?
I'd like to make a comment.
Very fine. But first, I need to ask if anyone can make a motion to extend this meeting to 10:30.
This is Karen. I make a motion to extend our meeting to 10:30.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Macy, we have a motion and a second to extend to 10:30. Please take the vote.
Trustee Blakemore,
Yes.
Trustee Coombs Ismail,
Yes.
Mayor Taylor,
Yes.
Trustee Corvalon,
Yes.
and Mayor Pro Tem Mahold.
Yes.
Thank you.
Ms. Chipai, please proceed.
Kathleen Chipai, 30-year resident, 18-year business owner. I just want to thank Jesse for staying on this, and I want to support whatever comments she just gave because I fully trust that she's had her hand on the dial on this and knows what's going on, and since she lives there, I'm supporting taking any advice she just gave. That's it.
Thank you, Ms. Chipai. Any other online comments? Seeing none?
No, hello.
Okay. Thank you. Name,
Yep, hi, this is
and 3 minutes.
This is Julie Gustafson, and I live at 32 Barker Road in Big Springs. I appreciate the energy and commitment I've heard to this project and to expediting it based on evolving demands for the federal funding. I think it's really very important and long overdue. I do want to recognize that it might get lost in all of the paperwork and the to-dos, but the fact that both the Boulder County Open Space Department and the Boulder County government gave access across their open space lands, and that the National Forest Service did the same when routes were to cross theirs it's a huge deal. It doesn't happen or hasn't happened historically, even when communities have built up in the way that Big Springs did to allow only one egress, which could cause really catastrophic consequences. I appreciate all the work everybody's done into trying to find the best, least impact route. And I want to just emphasize the importance of fire department buy-in to that, making sure that we have not only a way for our community members to get out, but a way for firefighters to stay safe when they come in and to be willing to come in. I don't remember with any certainty, but I feel like there might have been stipulations on that open space allowance initially. Things certainly have changed a lot since then, so we might be able to get funding from the county to help. But I think when these discussions first happened and when that approval was first given, there wasn't room to ask for funding for the egress as part of that agreement. So that would be new, and I would just urge caution on demanding it and really remembering that they're partners and we're part of their community, and they know that too. The other thing I wanted to suggest is that we, before the fire season actually gets into full swing, which it's not, which is hard to believe, but that the board consider hosting a practice evacuation for the community. This can be done before the egress is complete. But we don't know what it looks like when everyone tries to leave, and we can project and infer where the problems will be, but it might help to actually run through it and see what happens, both to inform decision-making in a real emergency and also to inform all of us who live here on how we would manage that. So I think that that would be something we might be able to do to help make us safer in the upcoming fire season this year and beyond. And again, just thank you for all your work on this. I really appreciate it, and I hope you guys feel the support from the community when you continue working on this, and let us know what we can do to help make sure that the funds that we were told about as far as funding the egress actually come to fruition.
3 minutes are up.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gustafson. Does anyone on the board have any questions for Ms. Gustafson? Again, I'm being a little.
Tanya. I
Yes,
just want to say that practice evacuation is a really good idea.
I agree, yes.
And I don't know how we could go about it. I don't think that'd be that hard to organize.
Can I
definitely
ask
some
Chief
of the-
Scott? Yeah, if that's, I mean, I don't think that's town-led. I would argue that's fire department, but Chief Scott, is that something that could be pursued?
Yeah, that is definitely something we can work on. I can work with Chief Feinloven about that, as well as the emergency manager, and see if we can test all those systems. I know there's evacuation pinnacles already in place, and we can possibly, once I sit down with you, Miranda, and Jen, and we can plan something out for the town and what that looks like, as well as the notification prior to that event. Rather we run it in the paper or on the radio, things of that nature, so folks know it's just a drill and an evacuation drill. And I know that there was some places of business that would not be able to participate, but maybe we can account for those measures, as in but at least have a plan in place in the event of an emergency does occur.
And one thing I want to share, and this is not specific to Big Springs, but actually on Friday morning, town departments are coming together with the shelter team and the fire department, because there's so many new people in these various roles, just to make sure we have our ducks in a row on how we pull together the sheltering or the emergency preparedness groups. And then also, you know, impact on our water and our police department and the fire department. And so that is going to happen on Friday. And then, of course, continuous meetings from there. But it'll be the first time bringing the whole group together, just to make sure everyone knows kind of who's who and what the step is to execute a shelter should we need to.
I would just like to note, thanks to Ms. Gustafson, we see how participation by the public really brings new innovation to what this board can do. So thank you very much, everyone. Any other thoughts online? Seeing nothing online, I'd like to go, I think I'd like to ask you, Miranda, everyone on the board has spoken. Do you feel that you have direction here?
Yeah, I think that where we'll move forward is working with Attorney Madison to discuss strategy for talking with these neighbors, and to Trustee Corvalon's point, what are our kind of negotiation tools. I'll keep moving forward with FEMA. I'll talk with various financial entities, and then if you hear about any grants or money, kick it our way. But we'll put kind of our whole team, especially Jennifer Waltz, our grant writer, will dedicate significant amount of time to get us move forward on this.
Very fine. Thank you.
One suggestion, I work with Trustee Blakemore, who lives in the neighborhood, who knows these folks, who's walked the route for years, and who's a really reasonable person.
Trustee Blakemore, are you being voluntold to come join me? Is that what's happening here?
Sure, I could do that.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Thank you very much, everyone. Let's move on to the next item of business, Ordinance 827, Parks Regulations. Miranda, please introduce.
Yes, this came to us from the Nederland Police Department. They requested that ProSab really look at park regulations because they had nothing to regulate. If you look in our municipal code, we have a section for the skate park, and that's really about it. And so, in an effort to support Nikki here in the police department, really felt that a parks ordinance was needed that provides that regulation. So before you tonight is that document. ProSab unanimously approved it with some slight amendments, but tonight we're really looking for your feedback. This is something you could approve tonight. It's not really necessarily the best form. Best form would be to bring it back. But Nikki, do you want to add anything else about the importance of these park regulations?
For the last 8 years, I've been the parks person for the town of Nederland, and now I'm the parks manager. And on a very frequent basis, I will call the police to a spot in Nederland, whether that's just an open space spot or Chipeta Park. Frequently, it's Chipeta Park. And the police officers' hands are tied because we don't have any rules or laws that are really in place for our parks in town. We kind of can guess on some things and take part of our town code and use those things, but we really needed something in place that would protect our amenities. I'm tired of watching people dump their household trash at Chipeta Park. I'm tired of watching people, drinking beer and partying it up in Chipeta in front of a bunch of kids. That's not appropriate. So we all came together, and I think that what you see before you with the ordinances, are the best version of what we could come up with. And I'm looking forward to hearing your opinions.
Thank you very much. So I have a couple of comments. Let me just make those real quick. In my reading, section 11-101H appears to be incomplete. There's something else there. Not sure what it is. So you may want
That
to
just needs to come out.
finish that, which is why probably we should bring this back for
for sure.
another- yeah, well,
We'd like
fully fleshed out.
Thank you.
And I have a particular concern about 11-102, which gives the town administrator authority to create regulations. My concern about that is that you may not be our town administrator for the rest of eternity, and we don't know who this person might be. And more importantly, it seems to me that it is mixing the executive and legislative functions. And I don't think there's any problem with a town administrator creating an emergency rule at some point, as long as that comes to the board. I felt the wording around that was a little weak. Okay. And so I would propose wording for 11-102 near the end to say, the town administrator shall inform the BOT of the additional rules and regulations at a regular meeting of the BOT, at which time the BOT may require and direct changes to such rules and regulations to be implemented prior to the next meeting of the BOT. Are you understanding what I'm thinking?
Yeah, are you going to email that to me? Yes.
Okay, so those are my only comments. Okay. And so Trustee Coombs-Esmail, please.
Yeah, I mean, that wasn't in there. That was one of our amendments that we asked them to make, was that the BOT be notified. I think that is perfectly reasonable. I do think we already have that power, okay, right? So adding it there is slightly redundant, but it could be useful in terms of so people realize that this is something that can be changed. The one thing I was going to say is that what I hoped that said would be that the town administrator is required to inform the BOT at the next regular meeting after those changes are made, rather than simply at a meeting at some point. Yeah.
Okay, added, no
But
problem.
yeah, that was a concern of ProSab as well, and that's why we added that in there.
It's just a matter of the legislative branch being able to officiate over the legislation.
Indeed. I think that the concern from Attorney Madsen and staff was, what if something in the parks is changed? What if there's a construction project ongoing and somehow a new rule needs to be created in order to preserve the integrity of that project. And we said, well, as long as you tell the BOT so the BOT can strike it down if they feel like doing so.
Yeah.
We'd be okay with that.
Very fine. Thank you, Trustee Coombs Ismail. Trustee Corvallin.
I was wondering if there was that suggestion by, I think it's Chris Hess, about not saying sunrise, sunset, but saying 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. or a specific time. Did you guys change that, or is it still sunrise, sunset?
So that comment came in after the packet had been prepared, so there were no
I
changes.
think that's a valid point. That in the winter time, sunset's so early and people might still want to be walking, and still like normal. 7
Yeah,
p.m.
we
isn't
don't
like
have any
late or
concerns
anything.
with providing specific times.
I just would say I would personally really appreciate it if that was run by ProSab.
Okay, great. Will do.
Thank you, Trustee Coombs Ismail. I'm terribly sorry. Thank you, Trustee Corvallin. Mayor Pro Tem Mahold.
Thank you, Trustee Corvallin, for catching that. I think that's important. Yeah, I agree with what you were saying about running it by ProSab. I think can be worded properly. I agree strongly with the frustration of having to deal with people coming in and abusing the park, all of our parks. And I think it's time that we dealt with it. And I think this is appropriate. I support this.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Mahold. Trustee Blakemore.
I have a few comments throughout the ordinance. My very first one is about fines. Who determines the fines? That's not part of the ordinance.
Fee schedule. The fee schedule the Board of Trustees will pass annually. Would it be the fines? We wouldn't assess them any other way.
Okay.
Yep.
Sounds good. Okay. Section 11-100 applicability. There's a mention of having authority over trails or in parks, parkways, recreation areas, open space, and trails belonging to the town or within possession and control of the town, whether located within or without the corporate boundaries. So do we have any such properties? Okay, should that stay in there? Or?
I think Attorney Madsen's feeling was that it does leave it open. Like if someone were to want to gift some parcel to town that may be bordered in town and out of town, then we wouldn't have to go back. And then you could have the same enforcement of that parcel. But we do not have it now.
Okay. Yeah, I like the idea of extending the usage hours from 10 p.m. or not being able to use it from 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. instead of sunrise. I noticed after the Frozen Dead Guy Day Festival, people were using the Tungsten Trail to get home. I was, and it was dark, and to get to their cars. So maybe there's an exception if we're going to say sunrise to sunset for certain activities. Will we have signage about when the parks are open? Probably that'd be a good idea, right? To say this park is closed between 10 p.m. and 5 a.m.
I default to Nikki, but yes, I mean, I think also a part of the Parks and Trails Master Plan assessment is to evaluate signage. Wayfinding I think will be a big thing. But if this passes, I would assume, Nikki, you would want to sign it sooner than later.
Okay. All right. Section 11-101, general regulations, item J. So we say that you can't swim, dive, ice skate, walk on ice, use any flotation device not designed for fishing. So do we really allow flotation devices for fishing in the reservoir or on the creek? We do? Okay. What about stand-up paddle boards on Middle Boulder Creek west of the weir? I saw some of those one summer. And they said, this is allowed because we're not on the reservoir. Instead, they were on the creek leading into the reservoir. Stand-up paddle boards.
As far as I know, kayaking and all the smaller water sports are allowed on the Middle Boulder Creek area. It's not a desired creek to kayak or paddleboard on. There's only really a couple week period where it's deep enough to do those things.
Yeah, they were just kind of playing around in one place, just kind of going back and forth. All right, so maybe that needs to be included here, that because what we're saying is that sometimes you can't use a flotation device unless you're fishing, whereas that's not the case, you said.
That would really be something that would be up to ProSab if we wanted to open that can of worms. I've seen a couple of tubers on Middle Boulder Creek during that spring runoff time. That's it. It doesn't really bother me, and it's happened so rarely that it hasn't been a problem.
But it will be disallowed according to this ordinance.
Not if we post it. According to this ordinance, we can post that is allowed.
Sure.
And that's allowed.
I think that it would be something that would have to be, that would be something that the town administrator would have to bring to the Board of Trustees if it became an issue. And we'd have to create a new rule or not. But I don't see that being a big problem or issue at all.
Okay. Let me move on then.
Trustee Blakemore, do you want us to, since we're going to bring this to ProSab, would you like us to explore that more with them?
Well, I saw a couple using stand-up paddle boards on Middle Boulder Creek, just west of the weir. And so I read this and it's not allowed. And I'm like,